Xiaomo, who was moving around the schoolyard, was a little worried about the mock exam that was going to take place the next day, which was why all the students were released early. Saying goodbye to her friend, the girl said that she wished the guy good luck and hoped that everything would work out for him. This was the most beautiful girl in the school, who was called Xiaoxi. Besides, she was a great student and was a shareholder of Tiamong Group. Taking his bike, the young man waved to his beloved, realizing that he did not have the best grades. In addition, he belongs to an average family. The young man knew that he was very lucky to meet such a beautiful girl. Although the gossip about it did not subside for a moment, the students thought that the guys were completely unsuitable for each other. Moreover, they were surprised how a beautiful girl could look at such an ordinary boy. On the way home, Xiaomo constantly asked himself this question. The teenager knew that Xiaoxi was really cool, so he had no idea why he chose her. The young man understood that his girlfriend had excellent academic performance. She was the first, and therefore they would definitely not enter the same university. He simply would not reach her level. Our hero, as if mocking himself, constantly asking himself the question of whether he is good for this beauty. A moment later, when the young man was thinking that he would like to be the hero of a novel, he heard someone say something about starting the system. Xiaomo jumped up from his seat and tried to figure out where the bright light in his room came from. Due to the fact that nothing was visible, the guy covered his eyes with his hand so that he could at least see something. Suddenly, a girl appeared in front of the hero, who congratulated him on the fact that the activation was quite successful. The teenager sat motionless on his bed for a while longer, trying to make sense of what was happening. But in the next instant, our hero made a grimace of displeasure that said a lot. Hiding behind a cabinet, the young man asked who was in front of him and added that if a stranger approached, the guy would defend himself with a ruler. Nervous Beauty said that the system is not a joke. It is the latest high-tech development of the planet. If the teenager will perform tasks, you can get rewards. She added that while Xiaomo is still a regular user, to become a host, you need to pass a test. And then she said that the system gives the first task, adding that the student has the opportunity to enter the top 10 students of the class. After hearing how our hero said that he can only enter the top 10 worst, the system replied that he himself just said that he wants to be the best, and therefore, if he does not complete the task, the system will be deleted. The frightened teenager asked if it was true that in this case the assistant would also leave. Laughing, the stranger said that she was not the devil to give impossible tasks. After a moment, it seemed to our hero that something unusual was happening to him, as if additional forces were appearing in him. The assistant said that this is a free beginner's kit, it expires in a month, and how far the student gets will depend on their willingness to work. And, waving, the stranger added that she hoped for an early meeting with the teenager. Xiaomo didn't believe all of this, so he stood there and couldn't move, wondering what was going to happen next. And then a scoreboard appeared in front of the young man, on which his age and other parameters were indicated. To the young man, all this seemed somehow wild, so he continued to study the scoreboard. Unexpectedly, Xiaomo replied out loud that the system had given him a gift, giving him a phenomenal memory. As he sat down at the table, he told himself that he didn't know what this was going to lead to, but he knew that he wanted to at least try. Within a minute, our hero opened the first textbook and immediately began to study it carefully. Getting up from his chair, the student happily shouted that the system did not deceive him, because in fact he managed to remember everything that was read. And then he thought about what the system said. If he didn't make it, it would immediately leave. This means that immediately after this moment, he will return to his normal life. You will have to face ridicule and contempt again, with which nothing can be done except to endure or run away every time. The young man shouted loudly that he didn't want this, especially now that there was a unique chance to change his life. Thinking about it, Xiaomo decided that he should definitely get at least 3 hours of sleep, so there would be about 14 hours left to prepare. In 15 seconds, the student managed to read and memorize 2 pages, spending a minute on 8 pages. In an hour, it will be possible to learn 480. If you manage to remember all the answers and questions in Chinese and mathematics, then you will be able to increase your knowledge level to 100 points, so you will be able to score the required 600 points. So, the results of the best student of the class, which is Han Zheng, are 650 points. If our hero gets 600 points, he will enter the top 10. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, when the guy was sitting and studying, the mother came into the room and asked her son to eat first, and only then continue to study. But the young man did not pay any attention to her. And this already happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, when the woman came into Xiaomo's room and reminded him that he had an important test tomorrow. At 3 in the morning, lying in bed, the young man did not sleep. Shining a flashlight on the book, he continued to read carefully. At that moment, a stranger appeared in the room who noted that this teenager was trying hard, despite the fact that 1,072 of his predecessors simply failed. And she added that even if you get the strongest ability, you can't get anything without hard work. Only those who work hard can get this magic system. The next day, at the proper time, The young man was already at school, realizing that an important test was waiting for him. He thought to himself that he hadn't slept much, but he could see his goal clearly, so he knew that he would be able to sleep it off later. Our hero looked at each question, and the answers to them are recorded in his subcortex. Hearing Xiaoxi's question about whether his classmate was ready for the exam, he replied without hesitation that he thought he would be able to get into the top 10 students. The beauty didn't say anything, but she thought to herself that the guy had somehow changed a little. The guy who was sitting next to him drinking tea choked at this moment, realizing that Xiao Mo was talking about some unrealistic things. Scratching the back of his head, the student noted with humor in his voice that it probably sounded a little presumptuous, which was true. Blushing, the beauty said that she really believes in the young man, and therefore it is normal that he says so. Leaving the classroom, the girl noted that it was already time for her to go, but they would meet for lunch, after which she once again wished good luck. The young man did the same. He did not turn around, although he could hear his classmates laughing and actively discussing their couple behind him. The guys said that our hero is a real clown, although he thinks that at such moments he becomes incredibly cool. Putting on his headphones, Xiao Mo knew that all the talk was about him again, so he wasn't going to listen to it all. But in the next moment, something strange happened to our hero, because his hand automatically clenched into a fist. Slamming his fist lightly on the table, he thought to himself that after a while, these people would see what he was really worth. There were so many weak kids in their class. There's no one who would take this exam seriously. Opening the sheet, the young man looked at it carefully and even noted something to himself. The teenager realized that he was looking at one of the questions he had learned that night, the difference being only one meaning. As Xiao Mo carefully studied the test, he was surprised to find that he couldn't believe that he knew the answers to all these questions. It seemed that for the first time in a long time, the schoolboy's eyes lit up, because he really believed in his own strength. Moreover, our hero decided for himself that 600 points is a mere trifle. He is sure that he can even get over 650 points if he tries. The teacher who was walking through the rows was immediately surprised when she saw Xiao Mo, because she saw how fast he was completing tasks. The teacher was wondering if the young man writes so fast because he doesn't know anything, or vice versa, and therefore came closer. In the next instant, the girl's eyes widened. Moreover, she couldn't move from her seat. 4 days later, when he entered the classroom, he heard Fatty Wang chuckling at him, saying that someone who claimed to be one of the best in the class had come. But the disciple wasn't going to stop talking about how everyone was being modest, and no one was even planning on showing off, unlike Xiao Mo, who was joking again. This time, the teenager wasn't going to put up with it, and therefore noted that everyone was jealous. And therefore, this is how they behave. They can't meet Xiaoxi. Therefore, they constantly bully the guys. Suddenly, the teacher came in with a large stack of papers. Everyone in the room noticed the teacher slamming a stack of papers onto the table. The teacher explained that it was just a mock exam to check the readiness of students. All tasks were sorted out in class. And then she screamed that she didn't expect the guys to do so badly on the test. The girl explained that if they don't know how to pull themselves together in a critical situation, then how are they going to go to college? Then she said that she was going to announce the results, and started with the worst result that Liu Yu showed, which was only 367 points. Only a minute passed and the teacher immediately called another student, saying that although he scored a lot of points, he did not go very far. Despite the bad things, there were also good things, so some students were happy that they managed to surpass themselves. Although Han Jiang, who was sure that he would always be the class leader, was surprised this time because he was second. Students immediately began to communicate with each other, saying that this is simply impossible. Given that only one participant was not announced the test results, after a short pause, the teacher said that Xiao Mao had scored 702 points and was ranked first in the class, as well as second overall. As he walked toward the board, he could hear the others talking in surprise about how impossible it was. It is interesting that the interest did not subside among teachers, who noted that before our hero was always at the end. But now somehow he suddenly broke ahead. One of the teachers shouted that the student cheated because he had never seen someone so sharply wiser in his life. This does not happen. But the colleague objected, noting that whether the man thought about what if the guy even spied reference materials for the exam, and immediately fell silent. Then he went on to say that he wouldn't have been able to score 700 points the first time anyway. Another girl also confirmed this. She said that it is impossible to find the answer in a book if you have no idea where the necessary material is located. And then my colleague and I said in one voice that this means only one thing, that the student actually studied hard and wanted to pass the exam well. At that moment, a man slammed his folders on the table and closed his eyes, drawing attention to himself. The man said that he no longer wants to hear all these arguments. Therefore, each of the teachers must make a new exam version the next day. And he added sharply that based on this option, Xiao Mo would have to take the test again. The next day, the school was as quiet as usual, with the students going about their business during recess. This was also done by our hero, who thought to himself that everyone had forgotten about what happened the day before, and this could not but rejoice. That is why the student had a moment to relax a little. Stretching, our hero was glad that he perfectly remembers all the material, and therefore will not forget it, even if he wants to. At that moment, a teacher entered the office and asked Xiaomo to immediately follow her to the staff room. Getting up from his seat, the young man began to worry, because he did not understand why he was being called, because nothing like this had ever happened before. The students immediately started whispering to each other behind their backs, saying that the teachers understood everything. They realized that the guy was cheating during the exam. After entering the office, the young man politely greeted all the teachers, as well as the homeroom teacher. One of the men who sat closest to them said that there was no point in talking at length about why they had invited the student, and then he explained that some teachers doubt that the young man honestly wrote the exam, given his past results. However, there are also those who believe in the teenager, which is why he arranged for the student to prove himself and rewrite the test. Xiaomo didn't understand this, so he asked if it was true that he would be taking this test alone. The young teacher, taking out a folder from the table, said that the guy should not think that they do not believe in his powers or something like that. However, it is best for a young person to perceive the retake as an opportunity to improve their own knowledge and results. Sitting at the table, the student said that they were so friendly to him and talk about such pleasant things, so they definitely think that he cheated. As Xiaomo picked up the task sheet, he thought that he had learned all the questions anyway, so he wasn't afraid of retaking them. Although in the next minute the young man saw something amazing and therefore immediately asked what it was. The teacher, who was standing behind me, said that this is a list of new tasks, and therefore the student will not have the opportunity to spy on something or write it off. Inwardly, he thought that he hadn't cheated on the mock exam, but if he couldn't solve these tasks, he would be unfairly accused of lying. At this moment, his invisible assistant appeared in front of the young man. She asked the young man if he missed her, and then she said that she wanted to congratulate the teenager on the fact that he perfectly coped with the first task. The teacher, who was still standing behind the student, thought that Xiaomo was acting strangely, thinking that the student was just afraid of the list of questions. Clenching his hand into a fist, the young man announced to the system that he was ready to receive his reward. The teacher immediately told the student to stop joking, not realizing that he was communicating with an invisible assistant. The young man knew that time was passing, so he immediately began to complete the task. The teacher did not take his eyes off our hero, thinking that this person is a bad student. As for the behavior, it is proof of that. Half an hour later, the student was already holding the sheet in his hands, happy that he was doing well. And to prove it to the others, the guy told the teacher that he had already mastered chemistry. Interestingly, half an hour later, the student reported with joy and satisfaction in his voice that he had also completed the math test. The teacher, who was standing next to her, was carefully looking at what she had written, but she was in no hurry to say anything. Suddenly, the girl was surprised to say that she had no idea how this teenager was able to cope. After a moment's thought, she said that she wasn't sure about chemistry because she wasn't the one who wrote the questions, even though it didn't seem like there were any mistakes. But as for mathematics, everything is written just perfectly. All the answers are correct, and even teachers can envy the solutions. And while the student continued to do the work, the teacher once again declared that this is actually a great job. The teacher said with anger in his voice that if he had known that these tasks would be so easy for the student, he would have come up with something that the student would probably not have coped with. The physics teacher, adjusting his glasses, explained to everyone gathered that his colleagues should not worry, because the tasks in his subject are very difficult, and they will have to be strained to solve them. And he added that there are so difficult issues that even the best of the best will not be able to cope with them. Xiaomo thought that teachers were bad conspirators because he could hear them very well. Turning around, the student again happily reported that he had completed the next test, and it was a good thing that he had spent only about 30 minutes on this work. A man who had recently told everyone that what he had come up with would not be solved by anyone, now asked with surprise why the schoolboy wrote everything so quickly. And then he shouted how our hero was able to spend less than half an hour on such a difficult task, which he came up with all night. The teachers were surprised. They thought that it only took them 30 minutes to check. And this despite the fact that they themselves came up with these tasks and the guy decided everything during this time. Again, adjusting his glasses, the physics teacher suggested that if the young man had been studying all this time, he simply showed bad results on purpose, for some reason of his own. Our hero, hearing a question from another teacher about what kind of game the student is playing, said that everything is extremely simple. For him, it is actually a game. Grabbing the student as hard as he could, the man began shaking him, asking if the boy had actually solved the last problem on his own. Spreading out his hands, Xiaomo asked with some naivete who he could ask for the answer from, if the teachers who had been watching him closely had been in the classroom with him all this time. After scratching his head, the teacher admitted that he was just a little confused and immediately added that he was actually glad that the guy scored the most points. After that, He said that the teenager was a real genius, and therefore it would be a big omission if the student did not take part in physics competitions. Our hero, hearing about this, immediately asked if they give extra points for participation during the entrance exams. The man proudly stated that, of course, there are bonuses in this case. When he heard that the young man could be the second best student and would have the opportunity to enter any university, he suddenly said that he was not interested in participating in the physics competition. He bowed his head and said that if there were no more questions for him, then he would like to go to class by now. Xiaomo knew that he had to show everyone that he was confident, so he proudly walked towards the door. The crowd watched the man closely, though they were in no hurry to say anything to him. In the next instant, the teachers looked at each other carefully, not understanding how this student managed to do the impossible. Moving along the corridor, the teenager told himself that it was good that he coped with the system task and received a reward, although he doubted that it would be easier from now on. The guy remembered how 3 hours ago, when his assistant first appeared, he shouted that he was ready to receive his reward. The girl smiled, and the computer notified the hero that his reward is the ability to quickly comprehend. Closing his eyes, the young man thought that he felt as if his mental abilities had improved. So when Xiaomo looked at the tasks again, he decided that they were not as difficult as they seemed before. Unexpectedly, the guy snapped out of his own thoughts because Xiaoxi called out to him. Approaching the beauty, the young man also greeted her, happy that they met. Coming closer, the student asked what his girlfriend was doing on the 6th floor. In a startled tone, she explained that she had heard rumors that a friend of hers had been called to the staff room. So she immediately began to worry when she heard the young man explain that he had been forced to retake the exam. For a moment, the beauty was silent. She looked at our hero with a piercing gaze. Turning his head, the young man explained that everyone thought that he couldn't improve his knowledge level in such a short time, and immediately asked if Xiaoxi believed him. In the next instant, the student placed her hands on the boy's cheeks. In a soft tone, the beauty noted that she doesn't care what others think. She still believes only a teenager. The girl said that even though the student's progress is truly incredible, she knows that he would never lie to her. It seemed that Xiaomo didn't fully believe it, so he once again asked if it was true. After that, the confused guys looked at each other carefully. Finally, after a couple of minutes of silence, the beauty started to say something, albeit very timidly. The student noted that if the young man continues to study in the same spirit, then it turns out that they will be able to enter the same university. These were the most pleasant words that the teenager had ever heard, and therefore he did not understand how he could express his boundless joy. At this time, the teacher was leaving the office. He was thinking that our hero is not telling us something, because if he is so smart, then why is he afraid to take part in competitions? Taking the boy by the shoulder, the teacher began to tell Xiaomo that he was behaving inappropriately in this school. The teenager did not want to put up with this, and therefore stated that he did not do anything at all. Moreover, everything is serious between him and the girl, and therefore does not understand why they cannot stand in the corridor. The teacher didn't know what else to cling to, so he immediately started swearing again, although he didn't say anything intelligible. And then he added what kind of relationship school children can have. Moreover, how can children not know that their studies suffer because of their love? After a little thought, our hero asked the teacher a question about what place he occupies in the school, and heard that the second. After a moment, the disciple asked about Xiaoxi's position, and again heard that she was the first. He threw up his hands and asked a rhetorical question about whether the teacher was sure that their relationship was actually interfering with their studies. The man realized that he had said something wrong. The girl in turn just laughed. She was pleased that she was protected, but the teacher did not want to look stupid, so he told our hero not to say anything stupid. After that, he shouted that the young man's place in the competition has not yet been confirmed. This is a fact, but the young man calmly explained that the deputy director approved the results of his retake, and therefore, probably, the teacher is hinting that the student and the director conspired. The man started shouting again, telling the boy to stop clinging to him. Moreover, there is something suspicious in the fact that he does not want to participate in physics competitions, so he cheated. Finally, the girl spoke up, turning to Mr. Luo. The beauty said that the teacher is a very respected person in this school. That is why a person should stop insulting his students, especially talented ones, putting his hand on the shoulder of his friend. Xiaomo said that master actually had reason to believe so. The young man went to his teacher to say something to him. Our hero stated that he correctly understood that the teacher still wants the student to take part in these competitions. After a moment's hesitation, he went on to say that if Mr. Luo made a bet with him, he would do it. If the guy loses, then he will do whatever the teacher wants, but if he wins, then the man will treat their entire class to chicken. The school employee was silent, thinking to himself that if he treated 50 students, he would spend 1,500 yuan on them. But I decided that this young man suddenly changed his mind, and now it is clear that he is serious. At that moment, our hero said that the teacher doubted him, and therefore now he is afraid of this argument. Mr. Luo didn't immediately agree. He just said that the disciple just wanted to profit at someone else's expense, and therefore called the disciple a sly one. But then he added that if dinner was all he was asking for as a reward, then he agreed. The next minute, the two men shook hands in agreement. Sometime later, the physics competition that Xiaomo was supposed to participate in ended. Given that the weather was bad outside, all the students were sitting on the bus. The teacher thought sadly that these students were not expected to perform well, even though Linhai High School was never very good at this kind of competition. The teacher, who was supposed to be the team leader, took a leave of absence and asked a woman to replace him. It seems that the school doesn't really care about these competitions. The girl was thinking about how she had been teaching for 7 years, but she had lost out to some new girl named Liu Yu, and, clenching her hand into a fist, she continued to think about how it happened that today she got this thankless job. The teacher knew that the competitor had a lot of experience as a supervisor, but decided that her students would be far away from their school. 5 days later, a small group of students from the school stood in the staff room and waited to hear what Z had to say. Our hero asked his friend if she knew why only they were called out of all the students. Thinking about it, Xiaozi guessed that it was quite possible that they were the ones who wanted to announce the results of the competition. At that moment, the man said that if everyone was gathered, then they could start. And then, pointing to the director, he noted that they wanted him to say something. Although at that time the teacher who was driving students to the competition began to swear, saying that our heroes were distracting her. The teacher looked at the children and immediately asked if it was true that they were third-grade students. Turning to Mrs. Lee, the young man asked her what she was talking about, and immediately added that he didn't think they were being disrespectful to the teacher. However, the teacher said that students are forbidden to be in a relationship, and students walk by the hand. And with anger in her voice, she noted that, most likely, the guys think that everyone around them is stupid, and only they are the smartest. Everyone in the audience thought that the reason was that the teacher simply didn't get along with class teacher Liu Yu, so she decided to take it out on the students. This idea came to our hero, but he decided that it was still better to keep his opinion to himself. Although in the next instant the guy took the initiative and told everyone that he and Xiaoxi were really dating because they liked each other, the headmaster looked at the students carefully and continued to drink his tea. But he was also smiling. The young man pointed at the man and said that he had known for a long time that they were a couple, and was not against such a relationship. Unexpectedly, the director spat out his drink, because this statement came as a surprise to him. Adjusting his glasses, the man said that he did not remember the moment when he said something about this. However, the guy noted that he clearly remembers how the director said that if they win a prize in the physics competition, then they can meet officially. Annoyed, Mrs. Lee said in a low voice that she already knew that the student was planning to turn her against everyone, but it still wouldn't happen. Suddenly, another teacher intervened to draw attention to himself, and immediately told everyone present that he was aware of this arrangement. Then, in a quieter voice, he turned to the director to ask if he had forgotten about it. Clutching his head, the man himself stated that he actually just remembered that they had discussed it. And then he said that the school was willing to allow a great student like Xiaomo a lot of things. After that, he noted that on this positive note, it is best to end an unnecessary dispute. However, the spiteful teacher still did not let up, saying that in this situation they want to make her extreme, claiming that she says the wrong things. Unexpectedly, the headmaster told Mrs. Lee to moderate her temper because he had something important to report. Realizing that it wasn't polite to interrupt in this case, the teacher tilted her head, noting that everything was clear to her. At this time, the principal said that their school won first and second place in the physics competition. In the first place is a student from their school, from the third grade, which is Xiaomo. As for the second place, Xiaoxi of the parallel class takes it honorably. Therefore, the man invited everyone to clap to the guys, as well as congratulate them on a brilliant victory. The teachers were happy about this turn of events, and therefore sincerely applauded their students. The audience was really happy that this time their school turned out to be a well-deserved leader. Only Mrs. Lee complained that the competition was somehow won by the weakest student. And this is despite the fact that the teacher had not previously heard about the success of this boy and could not understand how her colleague could have had a hand in this. And then she thought that if she had been the homeroom teacher of this class, it would have been her who was being congratulated right now, not her rival. At that moment, it seemed to the young woman that everyone was conspiring against her. After a while, everyone moved down the corridor, leaving the conference room. Suddenly, the teacher turned to our hero, who turned around and asked what he could do for us. The teacher, this time with a smile on his face, said that their bet was still valid, and then with great pleasure he would feed everyone chicken as promised. And then he added that at noon, all the guys should be fully assembled, and therefore asked the teenager to tell the rest of his classmates about it. But Xiaomo's reaction was strange because he told the teacher that he was just joking that day, so it wasn't worth taking it seriously. But the teacher replied that it was a fair argument, and therefore he still keeps his word. Moreover, a good mentor cannot do otherwise. And in the next moment, Hugging our hero, he was happy that the guy is actually doing amazing things. The young man thought to himself that it turned out that teachers were not really trying to make life difficult for their students. It's just that sometimes they're a little impatient and a little persistent. Entering the classroom, the teacher asked the students why most of them made a mistake in such a simple question. She added that everyone should follow the example of Xiaomo from the 3rd grade, who only needed a month of preparation to take the first place. At this point, our hero came up with the idea that, in fact, if you think carefully, then all the teachers are just worried about their academic performance. In fact, none of them wants anything bad, although sometimes there is a completely different opinion. In turn, Mrs. Lee shouted that after passing the exam, he still participated in competitions and won first place. Therefore, it was really possible to consider that teachers are the best of the best. The teacher didn't like that everyone was silent, so she asked them a rhetorical question about whether it was true that she hadn't taught them anything. Then she shouted that there was simply no one in her class who was as hardworking as Xiaomo. Among themselves, the students discussed that their teacher had already mentioned the name of this teenager a dozen times. If they did not know that he was a student of another teacher, they would have thought that this was her favorite. In reality, the teacher herself had no idea who this young man was, so she wanted to know a lot more about his family, as well as his past successes and achievements. As for our hero, he again recalled his communication with the virtual assistant, who said that the young man coped perfectly with his mission. As a reward, he got the ability of the quick comprehension system, and therefore now he will be able to solve the task set in one moment. It was actually a great reward that allowed you to not get attached to anything and do everything quickly enough. Xiaomo said that he couldn't imagine how he would be able to solve all these problems, but now the answers come naturally. If earlier a young man after school was always in a hurry and ran away first, now everything has become completely different. The reason was that since then, any task he could handle, so he is practically not afraid of anything and is not afraid. Suddenly, one of the students turned to the teenager and asked if he really planned to leave already. The guy honestly admitted that he had nothing else to do at school, and therefore asked a classmate why he was not in a hurry. The student explained that the reason is that they will have a match with the first class after school, and he added that of all the parallels, it is our hero who plays basketball best of all, and therefore without him, you will definitely not see a victory. Xiaomo scratched his head and said that he had been so busy lately that he had completely forgotten about this moment. When he heard his friend's request, he told Wang not to worry about it, and he happily declared that they would enter the field in order to defeat the opposing team, leaving them no chance. After a while, all the participants were already gathering on the basketball court. Young people who were already starting to warm up knew that their team was fully assembled. Finally, when they saw our hero and his friend, the students said that the guys finally came because they were already waiting for them. At this time, detractors from the first class, who called their opponents insultingly, asked if they were ready to accept their defeat. It was clear that the opponents considered themselves invincible, and therefore they did not plan to try too hard. But Xiaomo did not like this attitude. But the young man was not going to argue. He only said that he did not understand why the guys came to the playground, to talk or still play. The opponents only said that it was great, that the other team was also ready to start the competition. A student from the opposing team sharply stated that time is not rubber, and therefore suggested that the one who first scores 50 points should be considered the winner. Absolutely everyone was satisfied with such an offer, and therefore the game started just a minute later. Xiaomo knew that he was playing quite well, but he still tried to give his best. Young people from the opposite team watched their opponents closely. It seemed that they did not like everything in the game. The guys were counting on the fact that they would throw ball after ball and soon the game would be over. So, the leader of the first grade students happily informed everyone that the score is 2-0, and therefore they are in the lead. Our hero's classmates were upset. They understood that the opponents were playing hard enough, and it seemed that they were ready to kill for the ball. Wang suddenly turned to Xiaomo and asked him why he was not doing anything but just watching. But the young man was silent as he heard the opponent turn to his friends and tell them not to do anything further. Suddenly, a teenager spoke up and told his friend not to worry about anything. Inwardly, he thought that he was watching Zhang Dewei dribble the ball and break forward, and he felt the same way he did when solving problems, as if he was inspired. The young man seemed to be able to get into the technique of driving the ball. Moreover, he was able to understand how this person managed to bypass the defenders with the help of a new technique. The student knew exactly how to improve the movement and how to correct mistakes during the driving of the ball. Xiaomo was happy that he had come up with his own method that would allow the guys to win. The young man couldn't quite believe that the ability given to him by the system worked during basketball too. It was amazing how much his brain grasped the smallest details so that it could analyze them later. At this moment, Zhang Dewei was happily talking about how it looked like their opponent wasn't that good, so it wouldn't be out of place for them to use a block shot. But in the next instant, something happened that the guy did not expect, because our hero ran up to him. It seemed that the student does everything so filigree and fast that in fact he can turn the game in a different direction. And that was true, because only a few seconds had passed and the ball was already in other hands. The most interesting thing was that the teenager perfectly drove the ball, preparing to make a throw. The next few minutes were truly amazing, as Xiaomo quickly and easily passed the defense, and therefore already threw the ball into the basket. The crowd didn't believe that such a thing was possible in principle, so they watched closely. And a surprised Wang said that he had no idea how his friend had adopted the style of his opponent. However, the difference was that our hero's throw was much stronger and faster than the opponent's throw. Other guys have already started praising the guy for copying someone else's game so quickly, and also being able to implement it into their strategy. The leader of the opposing team, in turn, approached the guys and asked why no one stopped the young man when he threw the ball. However, the young people immediately realized that the schoolboy had stolen the equipment of their leader, and therefore asked why he managed to do it. The young man didn't want to answer this question. He just told the third grade not to worry and remember that the game had just started. However, inwardly, Xiaomo thought that the opponents didn't understand anything because the game was almost over. Suddenly, the guy tensed up and then said that now is the time to act and run forward. A short time passed, and the assembled players were already sitting on the field. And only our hero happily noted for himself that they had already scored 42 points, although they decided to reduce the pace a little, because the guys could hardly withstand the load. However, he was sad because the opponents didn't really fight back, so the game wasn't as interesting. In the next moment, the disciple decided that he wanted to know his limit, and immediately wondered what kind of wind was blowing. He decided that if the ability given by the system worked on basketball as well as tests, then he could handle it. And he paused for a moment. Suddenly, the opponent looked at the young man and asked what he was planning to do. The guy shouted loudly that the student was standing 3 steps beyond the three-point line. Although this was not a problem for our hero, he knew very well that the roll would be successful in any case, because he had calculated everything clearly. The players carefully watched the ball. It seemed to them that it was something incredible, which they did not expect. For a moment, everyone in the audience felt as if time had frozen, because everything was happening as slowly as possible. As expected, Xiaomo and his team were playing well, so when he left the field, he told the guys to study and train. And then he added that whether they are still able to play all this class, or it's just a waste of time. This was not enough for the young man, so he offered to play exclusively with him next time. Zhang Dawei was angry, saying that because of some boy he had lost all desire and mood to play. The other team was standing at the fence at the same time and carefully watched the guys. The young people felt that this was the best thing that could happen, and therefore they could not take their eyes off the ball. One of the students explained that this is another abandoned ball, and the result is already the 100th hit. And, as expected, Zhao is a real god of basketball. There is no one stronger than him. At the same time, someone suggested that Zhang join them to make the game more fun. However, the student admitted that now he has absolutely no desire to play. The young man did not back down, and asked if it was true that the young man lost with a score of 50-0. The latter, in turn, admitted that if he was as talented as other basketball players, Zhao thought for a moment, then said that he had heard Xiaomo's name somewhere, and asked if it was true that this student was in the 3rd grade. The guy asked about whether his friend really knows this boy. He explained that he had heard of him because Mrs. Lee told everyone about him and held him up as an example. Moreover, many classmates gradually talked about him even after school, although there was nothing like this before. The very next minute, Zhao asked his friend to tell him how the game went and how it happened that they lost. While walking down the street, our hero told Wang to go home, and he himself would still be late and wait for Xiaomi. But in the next minute, something happened that the guy did not expect, because he saw that the ball was flying in his direction. At the same time, the stranger carefully looked at the teenager and asked if it was true that it was Xiaomo who was in the 3rd grade. The guy didn't mean to be rude. He just pointed out that he had heard that the boy was a risk-taker. The young man did not know these people, so he asked the stranger who he was and what he wanted in general, adding that he did not touch anyone. After patting him on the shoulder, Zhang explained that it was a good time for the boy to meet the defender of their high school team, whose name is Zhao Junjie. Then he said that Zhao had heard that the student wanted to compete with someone else in throwing the ball, so now was the time to do it. Our heroes carefully watched the children, thinking that now is not the best time to sit down and relax. So Xiaomo threw the ball away abruptly because it was time for him to leave. For young people, this was something surprising, because they did not expect to be treated like this. Zhao Junjie immediately asked if it was true that our hero was dating the school's top beauty, Xiaoxi, and immediately added that he had no idea what she saw in him. The detractor said that it seems that this girl has something wrong with her eyesight, since she does not notice what kind of weakling she has contacted at all. For a moment, Xiaomo didn't seem to react at all to this provocation because he was completely calm. Moreover, he turned his back on the guys, But suddenly the student turned around and said in a calm tone that we can assume that the athlete managed to provoke him. At this time, other students began to approach the basketball court, who wanted to know what was going on there. Immediately, Zhao Junjie explained to everyone that it looked like someone wanted to deal with the ball god. While stretching his arms, our hero asked his opponent what he wanted, as well as what he was trying to achieve. The opponent immediately stated that as soon as the young man lost, he didn't want to see him on this field anymore. Moreover, the young man would break up with Xiaoxi. The teenager was absolutely calm. Starting to warm up, he said that everything was clear to him, and therefore it was best to play up to 10 points so as not to waste time in vain. He added that if the opponent loses, he wants him to call him Big Brother. Zhao Junjie was confident in his own abilities, but he did not agree to the bet, noting that the student first needs to win and then talk about something. The fans immediately started talking about how their leader was the top scorer among the province's high school students, so they didn't understand how a young man could challenge him like that. In the next instant, the guy who called himself the basketball god aimed the ball towards the ring. The girls immediately noted that this man has no equal. He is very cool, however, as always. It seemed that the young man didn't intend to waste a second. And then after a while, he repeated the same thing again. The opponent knew that they had agreed to make all the shots at once, and therefore filigree coped with their task. After a while, a friend told Zhao Junjie that he had scored 9 goals out of 10 attempts, and therefore it was best for the opponent to accept defeat, so as not to embarrass himself in front of the whole school. An arrogant high school student turned to our hero, but did it disrespectfully. Passing the ball to the teenager, the young man said that now it was his turn. Xiaomo caught the ball, calmness mixed with a mad desire to show off who was who in his eyes. That is why the student held the ball for a few seconds, thinking about the best way to make a throw. A moment later, the guy took aim and did what was required of him. However, the audience did not understand why the ball was spinning so much, realizing that this was a big mistake. Despite this, the ball flew straight into the basket and even rolled away in the direction where the young man was standing. Xiaomo remained silent as before, because he knew that everyone would say his results for him, and not empty words, as others like to do. Watching what was happening, the audience was surprised to note that the ball not only hit the basket, but it also returned to the hands of the student. The guys were also surprised that our hero had already thrown 5 goals, and all the hits were just perfect. A few minutes later, the audience was talking about the fact that the young man had already thrown 9 goals, but so far he had not moved, unlike the opponent, who was constantly running around the field. Suddenly, Zhao Junjie asked what was going on. If there was actually a living person in front of them who was doing such things? The guys who had previously considered the ball god of a high school student now began to change their minds on this matter. And, pointing to our hero, they joyfully declared that this young man is the best of the best, a real god. The teenager understood how the crowd reacted to him, but he was not one to be conceited, so he concentrated on the ball. The opponent thought to himself with horror that there was only 1 shot left. Would this guy really be able to score all 10 goals in 10 attempts? The audience was waiting for the denouement of this story, but it seemed that our hero was not going to surprise everyone. Turning his head, he noticed the basketball coach, Mr. Sun, who was standing off to the side, so he was a little doubtful. Looking around, the student thought that he just wanted to go to the same university as Xiaoxi, as long as he wasn't forced to take part in different competitions like back then in physics. Unexpectedly, the guy made a throw, but the guys were surprised to notice that it looked like the young man missed, which was quite annoying. So a minute later, when Xiaomo walked up to his opponent, he said in a naive voice that they had a draw. After a moment, the coach turned to our hero, telling him that the deputy director was calling him to his office, and therefore the guy waved to everyone, indicating that he was leaving. The teenager thought to himself that he was very lucky, because this man did not notice anything, and therefore everything went as it should. When Zhang Dewei approached his friend, he said that he was glad that the schoolboy missed, because he was already worried. But Zhao Junjie understood everything and immediately said that the boy deliberately missed. And then he explained that he saw our hero look at Mr. Sun and then throw a 3-pointer obliquely. The friend could not understand why this was necessary, and therefore assumed that the teenager simply wanted to preserve the reputation of the best player. And then he added that it was rare to meet people as quick-witted as he was. After a moment of silence, Zhao Junjie confessed that from that moment on, he began to respect the boy for his courage. At this time, moving along the corridor, our hero thought about why he could have been called to the teacher's room, because the lessons were over long ago, and it's just a miracle that he stayed late. Opening the door, the young man saw the deputy director, who immediately said that he was glad to see the student, and therefore he could sit down. The man said that since everyone was here, it was time to start their little meeting. The deputy headmaster informed everyone that he had invited the best students of the school to the office. But every year there are always those who fail the entrance exams among the best. Therefore, they decided with the teachers that he would lead the group of the strongest, And after school, he would conduct intensive additional classes for the children. Moreover, the parents are already aware, and therefore you cannot worry. Closing his eyes, our hero thought longingly that now he would still have to go to additional classes. But he didn't have to be sad for long, because a moment later the guy saw Xiaoxi, who happily greeted him. And so he thought to himself that if there was a friend of his, it wouldn't be boring anymore. The other guys were also smiling as they talked about how Mr. Zhang had once brought 3 students to the top, which allowed them to enter a top university. After a moment, the teacher explained that the students had task sheets in front of them, and he identified 2 reasons why high school students of previous years most often failed the exam. First, they spent a lot of time solving a problem. The rest of the tasks were simple, but it took a lot of time to solve one task, and they did not have time to cope with the rest. Secondly, they did not correctly understand the question posed in the task. The students spent time on what was not required and only then realized that this was so. At that moment, one of the guys said that the tasks located at the top are of average value, so they should not spend much time on them. But the tasks about chicken ribs will be more difficult. Xiaomo heard this and thought about it because he already had a clear plan in mind. The young man turned to Mr. Zhang and asked him if he could prove that the tasks were not difficult and that it was quite possible to get the highest score if he would allow him not to attend these classes. However, other students immediately called our hero an arrogant boy and said that the deputy clearly said that the tasks are solvable, just that they can take a lot of time. Turning around, Xiaoxi explained to everyone that the guy can prove that problems can be solved very quickly. Do not forget that he won first place in the physics competition. And then with a smile, she added that she herself was confident that she would also quickly complete the tests. The bespectacled young man shouted. As for the beauty, it's clear enough as it is because she has always been in the lead. But Xiaomo is a completely different matter. The girl was dissatisfied with the fact that someone does not appreciate another student, and therefore asked the bespectacled man if he really thinks that his friend is a liar. In the next instant, the boys were looking at each other intently, though they were silent. Mr. Zhang approached the students and asked them why they were suddenly arguing, since they were all here to study. And then he said that he perfectly remembers how our hero showed himself perfectly on the retake of the exam, decided everything quickly and correctly. In this case, his experience may be useful to other children, and therefore he recommended that this teenager tell his secret. Xiaomo didn't fully understand what was required of him, so he asked the teacher what exactly he wanted. The man noted that when the question of a relationship with Xiaoxi came up, he, as well as the director, supported the guys. The young man was embarrassed and began to thank the teacher for such an attitude. Therefore, he calmly stated that he is always on the side of his students and is sure that everyone here is ready to listen to the point of view of one of the best students. Scratching the back of his head, the teenager said with some naivety that in this case he would try. And he said that to achieve fast speed in solving problems, you need more practice, but they can improve their skills by memorizing problem-solving samples in advance. This is something like a software algorithm of actions, when before the main one there is still a preliminary process. Having memorized samples in advance, you can significantly improve the efficiency of work. For example, take problems in genetics, which are estimated at an average number of points and require a considerable amount of time, so they cause difficulties. There are many ways to solve the problem, but if you think through everything in advance and remember the formulas, then you will be able to solve the problem in a shorter time. The student noted that there are too many tasks and you will have to remember a huge amount of information. Plus, it is not a fact that this is what will come across on the test. The young man said that he believes that everyone will choose the best behavior for themselves during the exam. The teacher noted that the advantages of this method are huge. It will be possible to spend only 3 seconds on one task instead of 30 seconds. And in order not to get confused in the question itself and not go beyond the time limit, you just need to write the solution on a separate sheet and use formulas. It's like a game of chess. One move is thought out in advance, and by making a move, you can checkmate. Those who go beyond their capabilities, any tasks will be on the shoulder. Once again, the students asked whether all this is worth such efforts and whether it is possible to achieve such a result. Mr. Zhang admitted that the words of the student have common sense. Perhaps not everything that was heard should be agreed, but something definitely needs to be listened to. A month later, the teacher congratulated our hero, saying that he managed to overtake all the students of the school and take first place in the test exam. Smiling, the young man honestly said that it was he who should thank the teacher, because this time he managed to finish the test 10 minutes earlier than the allotted time and became more confident. Another student noted that he had worked with the group for the last 2 weeks on the exam version, and felt that he already understood the idea of working on complex questions better. Xiaomo scratched his head and said modestly that he was glad that he was able to help at least in some way. But he thought to himself that without a system like his, it would still be difficult for classmates to reach the highest level. At that moment, the guy was approached by his girlfriend, who just looked at him but did not know what to say to her. The young man realized that the beauty could be offended, and therefore asked if she was angry with him for being able to overtake her in the standings. With a sincere smile, Xiaoxi admitted that she was glad that the guy managed to get ahead and show himself in such a short time. Our hero did not understand what was going on, so he asked her to tell him what was wrong, realizing that the schoolgirl was hiding something from him. After a moment's hesitation, the girl said that she was actually doing well. But the teenager knew that something had happened after all, so he proudly declared that he was her boyfriend, and therefore, if she cared about his feelings, then she would tell the truth. At that moment, Mr. Zhang coughed loudly behind the guys, who said that the plan was completed for today, and therefore the guys can be free. Everyone gathered immediately began to slowly disperse, although our heroes were still standing, looking at each other. As they left, one of the guys winked and told Xiaomo to remember to close the doors. When they were alone, the two young men looked at each other intently, but neither of them dared to resume their conversation. Realizing that it was all a little delayed, the teenager once again asked the beauty to tell what had happened to her. With sadness in her voice, the girl said, "Most likely, it may happen that they will not be able to go to the same university." Hearing about this, the guy immediately began to nervously ask about what had happened and where such a drastic change had come from. The beauty explained that on the eve of her mother suddenly sharply said that she wanted her daughter to go to study abroad. She thought that when the young man's grades improved, they would be able to continue studying together. But now it turns out that this is not the case. Walking up to Xiaoxi, the teenager resolutely told her not to even think about worrying about it, because they would definitely be able to come up with something. The next day, our hero, his girlfriend, and the owner of this house were sitting in the hall of a large and beautiful house. The guy knew that he was going to start a serious conversation, but he also knew that he had to choose the right words. Xiaomu addressed the woman as an aunt several times, not knowing if she would like it. However, she didn't mind. The hostess explained that she was not one of those old-fashioned mothers who forbid their child to meet anyone, because this is an absolutely natural process. And then she added that she fully trusts the choice of her own daughter. After looking in front of her, Xiaoxi made up her mind and turned to her mother to also say something to her. But in the next moment, the young woman began to talk about how she was not against relationships, but there was still one caveat. The fact is that, first of all, her daughter should think about her own future, and everything else should remain in the background. As a mother, a woman wants her Xiaoxi to receive the best education possible, and then she asked the guy if he understood her, hinting that only she would make the decision in this regard. Our hero thought that thanks to the system, the best education is now available to him. But no university can compare with this system, but he can't tell other people about it. And after hearing about it, everyone may think that the teenager was making up something extra for himself. Xiaoxi, who was frightened, immediately tried to say something in defense of the young man, but her mother immediately interrupted her. The woman said that if this young man came here to change her mind, then she is ready to listen to him because she knows how to do it. Xiaomu was suddenly inspired, and it seemed like he had an idea. So he asked her to be quiet for a while because he wanted to talk to her mother. The teenager understood that he did not plan to put pressure on Pity, but wanted to talk as with an adult, and therefore began by saying that he understands that the mother is worried about her child. However, he does not understand at all what the hostess of the house means by a good education. The young man suggested that it could be a diploma with honors. Perhaps we are talking about a well-equipped campus? But Xiaoxi's mother immediately pointed out that it didn't really matter to her. After that, I asked our hero what he thinks a good education is, what it should be. Getting up from his seat, the teenager said that this is a place of thinking people, a place of masters of their craft. It is they who form the foundation of education. As for their home country, you can also study well here, having learned everything you need to build a future career. The next moment, the hostess applauded her guest and said that she was amazed at what he said. But after a moment, I noticed that there was one nuance that the guy still missed. The teenager did not give up. He again noted that in their country there are good teachers and the opportunity to get a better education. The woman started clapping again, saying that this time Xiaomu had managed to surprise her. However, a minute later, the hostess again noted that there was still one thing that the teenager did not mention. And while the system sent a notification that the guy activated the ability to anticipate the opponent's action and received a novice card, the latter said that it was a question of connections. The woman noted that the student is absolutely right. He said at the very beginning that strength is in people, and this is actually true. A minute later, the system again announced that the speaker was dealing 4 blows to all the opponent's followers. The owner of the house was sure that by maintaining communication with friends from college, it would be easier for the children to adapt further to the adult world. And once again, the system announced that the opponent throws in the harsh reality card and hits all the players' cards. The disciple felt a little uneasy when he heard about this. He knew that this move was very powerful, but he knew that he was taking it with dignity. Virtually, Xiaomu already knew what he was going to do, so he just waited until he could start and finish what he was going to do. Unexpectedly, the teenager said that it might sound a little incorrect on his part, but he would say it anyway, because it was very important. Connections are made by someone who has power. Kai can always contact Wang if he needs help, even though they are from different classes, and Niu Yun knows Niu Hua Wan. Perhaps it's really important for someone to establish connections in college, and he immediately stopped talking, then added sharply that he and Xiaoxi didn't need such a thing at all. The woman said that those who are below her in status are usually afraid to even breathe next to her. For a long time, she has not met such a confident young man as our hero. It's very rare for a high school student to show such courage. And she added that the young man reminded her of what she was like in her younger years. Xiaoxi confessed in a low voice that she had never seen her mother like this. The boy rejoiced, thinking that his argument about strength in people resonated in his aunt's heart. So things were going well. Although in the very next moment, something happened that greatly surprised Xiaomo, who thought to himself that this couldn't possibly be the case. For a moment, the teenager bowed his head, thinking about something else. Looking in front of him, the young man spoke to Xiaoxi's mother. But he was in no hurry to tell her anything. But when the disciple got up from his seat, he shouted that he would like to make a contract with the woman. The hostess looked at her guest carefully, but she didn't understand what he wanted, and also what he was talking about. She added that Xiaomo should not forget that he was still in school, so she didn't want his outburst to affect his studies in any way. But the guy with a calm voice assured the frightened woman that it would not affect her studies in any way, because he wanted to bet on his entrance scores on the exam. If Xiaomo gets the maximum score, then his girlfriend's mother must promise that she will let her daughter stay in China. But if he does not succeed, then he will do whatever the woman wants. Hearing about this, the hostess of the house was afraid. She asked the student if he understood what the maximum score was, and therefore asked if the guy hoped that he could get 750 points. The young man admitted that it is not easy at all, and no one has ever managed to get such a score on the entrance exams before. But if he is unable to do even that, how can he consider himself worthy of Xiaoxi? How can he have the courage to ask her to stay together with him? Closing her eyes, the woman admitted that at first the young man surprised her in a good way. But she hadn't expected him to think so highly of himself. After that, she said that since the young man himself suggested it, then she was ready to make this bet. But if she lost, then they would see if he was worthy of her daughter or not. The girl carefully looked at her mother. A real storm of feelings was read in the eyes of the beauty. But the mistress of the house sharply shouted that she would not entrust her daughter to such an egoist. And then, turning around, she said that she was tired, making it clear that she wasn't going to continue the conversation. A moment later, she turned her head and ordered her daughter to lead the man to the door. The guy saw that the woman was adamant. Our hero looked sadly at the floor and his girlfriend tried to tell him something. But suddenly, Xiaomo explained to his beloved that she shouldn't worry about it, because she would definitely be able to change her mother's mind. The young man said it was getting late, so it was time for him to go. As he left, the teenager was angry with himself, and he reflected that he hadn't thought things would turn out this way. And the reason was that the system sent a mandatory task that our hero should bet with Xiaoxi's mother on the highest score. If he loses, then he will be subject to harassment from school children. The next day, all the children were waiting for mandatory evening classes, which were attended by our hero. Vaughn was looking at his friend, asking him if he was too confident, had only recently won first place in the mock exam, and now he was showing that he didn't have to study anymore. But the guy sharply replied that the classmate should think about what he was talking about, and added that he reads newspapers in order to increase the level of his knowledge. But the student insisted that reading the news would definitely not help. Xiaomo explained that in order to get the highest score in the entrance exams, he had to score 9 out of 10 points in the other subjects, as well as writing an essay. After that, our hero plunged into his own memories of a conversation with his invisible assistant. The teenager complained that the system appeared only now, although it could have done it much earlier. But the blonde was angry, saying that the schoolboy should never call the Xueb system stupid and wrong again. The guy knew that maybe he wasn't quite right, so he said in an arrogant tone that he understood everything. And then he asked the assistant why she had given him a rather strange task. Folding her arms across her chest, the system said that it didn't understand what the guy was talking about, and added that no additional information was provided. Although after a moment, changing her anger to mercy, she reminded that the system would not give a task that a person could not cope with. Surprised, Xiaomo immediately asked, "Does this really mean that he can get the highest score in the exam?" But the girl did not want to discuss this topic, so she reminded the teenager how recently he won a basketball game, and therefore he is entitled to a reward for this. The young man thought that this was some new skill, and if so, it is not strange that the guy received a new task difficult. Unexpectedly, the system gave out a reward. This time, our hero became a master of calligraphy. Once again, the guy was confused. He had no idea how this new skill would help him pass the exams better than anyone else. Sitting in the classroom, Xiaomo kept telling himself that he would be able to get the highest score. There was no doubt about it. The most important thing was to write an essay well, because he would have to come up with it himself. The young man reflected that he simply had to get this top score, although he did not yet understand how to do it. The guy understood that he had to write a great essay that could find a response in the hearts of people and make them feel it. After a while, while stretching, Wang happily announced that all classes were finally over, so he could get some rest. The friend immediately turned to our hero and asked him if he would like to play ball. Hearing that a friend was going to introduce Xiaoxi to his mother, the schoolboy was surprised to notice that it looked like the right introduction. That is why after a while the young man was already in the schoolyard, where he met with his girlfriend. Having reached the house of our hero, the beauty honestly admitted that she was a little nervous before the meeting. But the young man explained that he had a wonderful mother, and therefore there was no point in worrying. Moreover, Xiaomo was much more worried when he went to her mother to talk about something very serious. The girl was about to say something, but at that very moment the door opened and the woman greeted her son happily. The woman did not immediately understand who was standing next to her son, but the young man quickly told about his friend, after which the beauty found the strength and introduced herself. The guy's mom immediately looked at the schoolgirl carefully, thinking to herself that she was really cute. Taking the guest by the hand, the woman led her to the apartment, saying that her son was very lucky to study with such a wonderful girl in the same school. Scratching his head, our hero thought that he couldn't remember the last time his mother was so excited about something or someone. After a while, the whole family was sitting at the table and having lunch. Time flew by very quickly, and therefore in a few hours, seeing off the guest, the guy's mother said that she would wait for the moment when the schoolgirl would come to them again. After that, the woman carefully looked at Xiaomo and ordered him to accompany the beauty to the car. Moving around the city in the evening, Xiaoxi admitted that she feels light and at ease, because the friend's mother is much softer and nicer than hers. The young man said that he was glad that everything went so well, and added that he would try to give his best. Laughing, the beauty timidly remarked that she didn't understand what the teenager was talking about. But he enthusiastically replied that he will get the highest score in the entrance exams, he will definitely be able to, he will do it. A few months later, interesting things started happening. Walking down the street, the stranger was looking at something carefully on her phone. After setting up the camera and taking pictures of herself, the beauty said that Zhao Yuyu was in touch with the audience again. Today was an important day because it was the last day of the entrance exams. You can see how many parents are gathered in the schoolyard because the college entrance exams are a big event for every family. In less than a minute, subscribers immediately flooded the blogger with the best comments. Pointing to the children who had just left the building, the girl said that it looked like those students had already done everything. It was obvious that the guys were smiling, and therefore they are probably confident that they have coped with the task set. After waving to our heroes, Zhao Yuyu asked how it went. After all, these are the entrants. Then she added that the exam was still an hour away, but the young people were already here, so she wanted to know what could have happened. Xiaomo explained to the blogger that the reason is that they wrote all the tasks and passed them. Surprised Blonde looked at these people with horror. She did not believe that they could pass everything so quickly, because many even have enough time. Embarrassed, the girl began to explain that it was rare for students to pass the entrance exam tests so quickly, so she asked if the questions were difficult. Although in the next instant I thought that she was asking some ridiculous questions. Coughing a little, our hero still did not intend to put the blogger in an awkward position, and therefore admitted that the questions were not particularly difficult. Suddenly, the guy boldly stated that he believes that he will have the highest score. Surprised, the blonde asked if it really took 1 hour for a student to get the highest score in a foreign language. But the young man calmly explained that he was applying for the highest score in absolutely all subjects. Subscribers, hearing about this, immediately began to write not the best comments, calling the teenager a real clown. She didn't know what else to say, so she thanked Xiaomo for the answers. And then she added that other guys will be coming out soon, and therefore she wants to interview them as well. As Zhao Yuyu walked away, she thought that this was a very strange student. And again, there were comments in which they wrote that it was necessary to interview the beauty, and not this comedian. Interestingly, other publications also wrote an article about what our hero said, and the material was not the best. The words that the young man said caused a large number of different disputes. It is interesting that all this came to the attention of the director, who, sitting in his office, carefully read the materials. After knocking on the door, Xiaomu asked the director if it was true that he wanted to see him. The man abruptly got up from his seat and walked towards the student. Patting the student on the shoulder, the manager said that the guy showed some carelessness. And then he handed the young man the newspaper, asking him to carefully read the fact that the publications are so actively rewriting. The young man started reading aloud about how the interview in Linghai City had led to a flurry of indignation, netizens hotly discussing the school's pretentious and arrogant students. Folding up the newspaper, the young man explained modestly that reporters, as usual, exaggerate everything. But the director explained that if it concerned someone else, then there would be no problems at all in this regard. But it was a talented student who came under attack. The exam results have not yet been announced, but the guy has already managed to become famous all over the internet. He turned around and asked how they could restore their school's reputation after this. But the student calmly said that the director should not worry about this. During the interview, the young man did not really lie because he was telling the truth. The school will not have any problems because he will be the best. At this time, interesting events were taking place in the venue of the university entrance exams. Looking through one of the works, the employee thought that it was a beautiful handwriting. It even somewhat resembled the handwriting of the head teacher. But most of all, I was struck by the fact that not a single error was found in this work. It seemed that the examiner did not fully understand what was happening because he had never seen anything like it. In the next instant, the young man turned to the elder and asked him to look at this unique essay. The man initially thought that the subordinate was just exaggerating the importance of this work, but when he started reading, he couldn't say a word. The senior said that this was a truly magnificent work, but most of all, the construction of phrases that was used was striking. The teacher said that he had never seen a student write like this in his life. The enthusiastic supervisor said that this is an unusual work. It shows the ambition and life philosophy of the student, and therefore such an essay is worthy of the highest rating. At that moment, the examiner explained that the student also coped brilliantly with other tasks, and so much so that there was nothing to complain about at all. The man said that he was not interested in other works. As for this one, they simply have no right to find fault, because it is a real masterpiece. A young man who was checking out a job approached another employee and asked her if she had heard the latest news. And then he added that according to insider information, as a result of this year's university entrance exams, one student scored the maximum number of points. The girl said in an arrogant tone that this could not be. All the data is hidden, and therefore no one can know the result in advance. But the guy said that it doesn't matter. The results will be posted in a few days, and then the whole truth will be revealed anyway. Confused, the blonde thought that this disciple could be Xiaomo. When they got home, Xiaoxi said that mom wasn't home, so they could start the exciting part they had been waiting for. The young man noted in a low tone that sooner or later this would have happened anyway, and therefore there is no need to worry. Embracing the girl's face, our hero noted that he does not want to delay any longer, and therefore wants to start it already. Picking up the phone, Xiaomo said that the results of the entrance exams are now publicly available, and while the guy clicked on the phone, the girl closed her eyes in horror, thinking to herself that she believed that her friend had made it. Finally, the student shouted loudly that it was him, although he did not explain what such a phrase means. Entering the room, the woman said loudly that she had heard some news this morning. Xiaoxi immediately quickly walked over to her mother, greeting her happily and noting that she had arrived early enough. After that, the woman looked at the young man and noted that she did not think that she would find him here. Raising his hand to greet his friend's mom, the teenager immediately started apologizing for causing her trouble. The girl did not want to waste time, and therefore immediately told the woman that she had received the results of the exams. The same woman asked a counter question about the fact that this is why her daughter is so happy. Then she turned to Xiaomo and asked if it was true that he had something important to say to her. Picking up the phone again, the student carefully looked at it and began his unhurried speech. And then he shouted happily that he had done it. Although he immediately asked why Auntie wasn't surprised, because this was big news. Aloud, the woman said that she knew it was a young man, but she thought to herself that this boy was not as simple as it might seem at first glance. And she explained that the morning news in Linghai City had announced that this year, among the students who passed the entrance exam, there would be an entrant with the best results. Thinking about it, our hero decided that, again, these newspaper news spread different information, and perhaps another person would have been happy about this. But the young man did not like it, and therefore he wanted to somehow deal with these media. A confused Xiaoxi immediately asked her mother what they would do with her possible study abroad. Smiling, the woman said that she was not opposed to her daughter staying in this country, if that is what she wants. Clapping her hands, the beauty said that everything turned out in the best possible way, which cannot but rejoice. Folding her hands, the woman spoke again. She noted that the fact that the young man managed to get the maximum score is simply incredible. However, this is still not enough to really impress her. The guy who had expected to impress his girlfriend's mom after this now didn't understand what else he could say or do. But the hostess of the house noted that she really liked the student's courage, as well as determination, in addition to this, and the ability to back up her words with actions. And, putting her hand on the guy's shoulder, she proudly stated that from now on, she trusted Xiaomo with her daughter. These words struck the schoolboy to the core, and therefore he honestly admitted that Yaoxi is in good hands. As she left, she thought about the fact that in a few years he would definitely stop calling her auntie. Hugging our hero, the happy girl said that they managed the impossible. They managed to cope with such a difficult task. It seemed that there was really no limit to the children's joy, because until the end, Xiaoxi did not believe that everything could have turned out like this. Suddenly, a woman spoke up and said that the guys just had to promise her something. After that, she said that young people should keep in mind that there should be no grandchildren until the end of the university. And in order to make her words sound more convincing, she added that this is strictly prohibited. The confused guy immediately asked what Auntie was talking about, and Xiaoxi also said that she didn't understand her mother. But the woman didn't let up, saying that teenagers are still too young for such things, so she doesn't want to become a grandmother before they finish college. Approaching her mother, her daughter asked her to stop talking about it. But it was clear that for the hostess of the house, this is not a joke. As he was about to leave, the young man turned to his aunt and promised that this wouldn't happen, that they wouldn't go this far with Xiaoxi until they finish their training, because he himself understands that children are a big responsibility. The hostess closed her eyes and explained that she believed what the young man was saying. If he was able to get the highest score in the entrance exams, then he will definitely be able to keep his promise. For a moment, our hero decided that it should not be so difficult to keep his word. Suddenly, the student's phone rang, and therefore he was distracted by it. The young man understood that his mother was calling, but did not know what she needed so urgently. The concerned woman explained that their home had already received several phone calls from the Kiowa University reception office. She added that she had been told what her son had managed to get, and then she fell silent. The guy understood what this meant for his mother, and therefore replied that she could be proud of her son. He became the first in the ranking of students who passed the entrance exams. When the woman heard about this, she immediately began to cry, because she did not believe that such a thing was even possible. The woman recalled how on the eve of exams, she constantly went to her son's room and told him to go to bed, but he continued to study. His mother found it hard to believe that the boy hadn't left his room because he never stopped getting ready. And then she added that the last few months must have been very difficult for the teenager. She said that she never expected the young man to get the highest score, because this is something incredible. The boy's father would certainly be proud of him. Xiaomo wanted to reassure the woman, so he told her not to worry about him, so she could be even more proud of him in the future. 2 days later, the guys decided that they needed to take a little walk. So when they met Xiaoxi, the guy said that she was the most beautiful. The beauty actually looked gorgeous, but what struck her the most was that the youth treated her as if she was his. Pointing to the bike, the student happily told the girl to jump back in because it was time for a ride. A few minutes later, the guys were already racing down the city street, happy that everything was going in the best possible way for them. The young man suddenly asked the girl, if she is not his, then why does she let him ride her bike? The embarrassed beauty immediately lovingly called the young man a real fool. After that, the guys again drove towards the park, each thinking about something different. So the teenager reflected on the fact that a few months ago everyone laughed at him, did not take him seriously. But now everything is completely different because the guy is confident in his own abilities. Although sometimes he still remembered the attitude that he once had, because everyone thought that the teenager was not worthy of Xiaoxi. Suddenly, the girl asked the guy if he had already decided where he wanted to go. Hearing how the schoolboy noted that his mother supported him, he would apply to the same place as the beauty. She was glad to hear that, so she lifted her head and simply enjoyed the nature and beauty of the world. All of a sudden, the young people saw congratulations that were hung on one of the buildings. It was written that Xiaomo is the best of the best and received the highest scores in the exams. The girl immediately said that it was very nice that the guy was so congratulated that he was noticed. However, in the next second, the teenager felt a hand on his shoulder, and a man's voice said that the young man had done Ling High School a huge favor. The young man turned around and said that it was not such a big event, and therefore there was no point in praising him so much. But all the gathered teachers who were standing behind the headmaster immediately began to applaud the student. Surprised, the student asked if it was true that everyone had gathered here to congratulate him, and added whether they really believed that he was worthy of such an honor. The principal again said that the school had decided to give Xiaomo a place on the honor roll for her outstanding performance in the entrance exam. Young people did not believe all this, realizing that this is almost the first time this has happened. At that very moment, the teacher remembered that in all the 40 years of the school's existence, only 4 people had ever received such an honor. They were titans of the literary world, internet giants who built their careers from scratch. In addition, political figures who have made their contribution to the development of the country, and academicians who have achieved high results in scientific activities were awarded this honor. However, now it was the turn of the most ordinary, seemingly unremarkable student. The most interesting thing was that the young man was only 18 years old. Many people couldn't believe that at his age this boy was already on the same level as such strong personalities. Even though a few minutes had passed, the teachers continued to stand outside and stare at their student intently. At that moment, the girl went up to the principal and asked him if this was too much of a reward for an ordinary schoolboy. Turning to Ms. Liu, the man asked if he could ask her something, and he asked why the wall of honor was needed in this case. if it was still empty. Most likely, it was invented in order to demonstrate the greatness of the educational institution, as well as to encourage future students to strive for excellence. For many years, the Wall of Honor was the standard of social success, but no one probably ever thought that it was considered something like a forbidden fruit for ordinary students. And if a talented person like Xiaomo didn't take his place on the wall, then how would anyone else be able to do it? With embarrassment in her voice, the teacher said that the man was right, and it actually made sense. That is why the director noted that in this case everything is actually solved, and once again loudly told everyone present that the young man deserves to be on the Wall of Honor. Students, hearing such a statement from the teacher, began to applaud, surprised by something like this. Our heroes were happy, although it seemed that the young man did not fully believe that such a thing was possible in principle. So, after scratching his head, he said that he wasn't really that good, so he couldn't accept such an award. The director, coming up from behind, asked our hero if he really still stands on his own after all that was said. Then, in a lower voice, he continued to point out that thanks to Xiaomo, the school would receive a grant of 20,000 yuan. And then he added that for everyone who is listed on the wall, the total amount of the grant will be 50,000 yuan. After hearing about this, the guy didn't believe what was happening because it seemed completely unbelievable. The student watched the headmaster closely, but did not immediately say what he had planned. After a moment's hesitation, he explained that it was his duty to serve as an example to other students. The man liked the mood of the young man, and therefore he noted that this approach was exactly what he expected. Turning around, the headmaster said that the student would have something to do in the very near future, and therefore he should be ready for it. Xiaomo had no idea what this was about, so he decided to ask about it just in case. The man said that the media want to interview the young man, and therefore he should not let down his alma mater and must perform with dignity. And while our hero was thinking, the director admitted that he had heard that the interview takes place live, and therefore will gather a lot of viewers. Do not forget that the student is the best student in the history of entrance exams who received the highest score. After a while, standing in the conference hall, the director told that this year their school was able to once again achieve excellent results. And while the journalist continued to ask questions, the young man continued to think about how you can never give the school a grant for such a large amount of money. Although in the next instant, the interviewer approached the young man and asked if he had something to say to the younger generation. Xiaomo was silent for a moment because he didn't immediately understand what exactly he had to say. The guy knew that ordinary school children do not have such a system as his, and therefore it is almost impossible to achieve such results. Although, on the other hand, the system is only part of the way because the guy was able to achieve such results thanks to the skills granted to him. If you think about it, what helped him the most was that the system's tasks were mandatory. If he didn't work on a daily basis, he wouldn't have come to this. That's why our hero smiled, because he knew exactly what he was going to say next. After that, he loudly stated that school children should not be afraid to hit the dirt with their faces. The audience did not immediately understand what this was said, and therefore carefully looked at the young man. But then he went on and explained that he knew a lot of people would laugh at him in the beginning, but he wasn't worried, even though it was a little scary. If you don't try, you will never lose. We don't realize how often we repeat such words to ourselves. We want to admit that we like a person, but we are afraid to look them in the eye. We are afraid to act at the crucial moment. We blame ourselves for this. We are afraid of failing the exam and so on. Although you need to make it a habit to always say that I am determined to solve it, which means that I will manage, so the goal will no longer seem so out of reach, Xiaomo admitted that he would not have achieved such a result without luck and the help of others. But what he still wants to share is worth listening to. He said that a young man is not afraid to fall in the eyes of other people, and therefore it is necessary to take risks. The young man again repeated that the children should not be afraid and boldly step forward, no matter what. The student was glad that he said everything that he thought, and that his phrases were not banal, but also memorized. Suddenly, the system sent a notification that congratulates the player on the love of fans, and also awards the guy 10,000 points, and the lottery was successfully launched. The invisible assistant immediately said that the owner has only one chance to win the lottery, and then I asked if the young man approves the launch of this very lottery. Xiaomo had no idea what was in store for him. Even so, his pride told him that he was prepared for any turn of events. In the next instant, the girl immediately automatically rolled a few dice. She happily informed the teenager that he was able to win the brilliant idea skill, although she was in no hurry to tell him what it meant. The guy with horror asked to explain what this means, but when he didn't wait for an answer, he assumed that it was something interesting and powerful. The assistant was surprised to say that chemists once discovered the structure of the benzene ring, and mathematicians in turn built a regular pentagon. But before that, they were real scientific discoveries. Or, in other words, brilliant ideas. The young man did not finish listening to the end and immediately said that he wanted to use his new skill. The young man was already reaching for his phone, although he wasn't sure exactly what he was planning to do. At the same time, the system told the teenager to use the skill, and if he suddenly needs it, he can always call her. Xiaomo found the top 5 mathematical hypotheses in the search engine and decided to review them. After that, the young man, concentrating, heard the system notify that the brilliant idea skill was activated. In the next instant, the guy was smiling, realizing that something very amazing had actually happened. The young man immediately picked up a pen and began to write something actively. And he was so absorbed in this case that he could not be distracted by anything else. Time passed, and it seemed that every minute there was more and more paper on the table, but the guy still continued his work. Xiaomo finally stretched because he realized that he was so engrossed in the task that he didn't notice how stiff his entire body was. The reason why our hero did not continue to study was that someone knocked on the door, although the woman was not waiting for anyone, because it was already 5 o'clock in the evening. The guy did not want the woman to work, and therefore said that he would open it himself, but the hostess of the house noted that the son should continue to study. Entering the apartment, a stranger asked if it was true that our hero lives in this house. The man immediately said that his name was Mr. Lee. He is the chairman of the admissions committee of Anna University. He would like to know which college the applicant chose. The woman was surprised why the representative of the educational institution personally came to the student, because usually nothing like this happens. It seemed that Mr. Lee had read the question on his mother's face, so he immediately said that he had come personally because the student was special. But before the lady of the house could close the door, another person knocked on the door and asked if Xiaomo lived here. He immediately explained from the doorway that he was here on behalf of the Taikoku University Admissions Committee. The two men looked at each other carefully, knowing that both competitors would have to fight for a talented student. The men began to discuss among themselves that each of them had come to intercept a great guy and a great future student. Mr. Lee suddenly noticed the sheets of paper that were lying on the floor, so he immediately reached for them. At this time, the representative of the second university was communicating with the guy's mother, telling her that they would present the best living conditions for Xiaomo, and therefore you cannot worry about this at all. The man insisted that the woman should talk to her son and convince him to choose their school. And if this is done, our hero's scholarship will amount to 300,000 yuan. In the next instant, the representative of the university was showing the hostess some document that she had to sign. But suddenly, Mr. Lee shouted at the woman not to rush to make a rash decision. Approaching the young man, the man said that if he chose their university, he would order that the student be paid a scholarship of 5 million yuan. The competitor, hearing about this, immediately looked at Mr. Lee in surprise, not believing his own eyes. Coming closer, the man asked how this is possible, because even a few of the masters receive such a scholarship. But it didn't matter to Mr. Lee, who said what? He noted that if it wasn't enough, then Xiaomo could name his price. The rector insisted that if the teenager entered their university, he would be able to ask for anything he saw fit. The competitor couldn't believe what he was hearing, not knowing if the student would actually dare to name a different amount. The teenager calmly explained that the fact is that he and a girl named Xiao Si decided to enter the same educational institution. And again, the rector proudly stated that a girl can choose any direction for herself. And as for the master's program, the guys will study for free. And while Mr. Lee promised a great dorm and other benefits, a competitor shouted that the university couldn't afford such scholarships, and therefore it was all a hoax. The university representative was silent for a while, but he knew for sure that he had to take his own course. So I thought he had a hunch that if he didn't keep this kid safe by all means, he might never know what kind of genius he was missing. After a while, sitting on the plane, our heroes were talking peacefully, laughing about something. The young man said that in the end, the face of the representative of the admission committee of Taikoku University turned black, although the beauty called her boyfriend a joker. Xiaomo recalled how 2 months ago, men had looked at him carefully, asking about his decision, and the young man confessed that his girlfriend had already chosen St. Anne's University. So then, they would go there with her. The man from the opposing side was interested, perhaps. The schoolboy will still change his decision because there is still time. Mr. Lee immediately asked if it was true that the representative of a competitive university was planning to set his own conditions, and whether he had enough rights to do so. After that, the competitors glared at each other again. Leaving, the representative of Taikoku University loudly stated that he did not lose. Just this time, he was unlucky. The woman, looking at the departing guest, thought that all this is happening in reality. She is not dreaming. Her son was invited to one of the best universities in the country, but he refused. And this was surprising. But it's hard to believe, because until recently, the situation did not portend anything like this. On the plane, Xiaomo talked about how good it was that they had managed to get into Anna University together. The happy girl said that this is actually great, because this way they can be together. The beauty confessed that she did not believe until the last moment that they managed to achieve their success, and then immediately fell silent for a moment. And after a moment, she confessed that she always believed in the young man. but his grades were not so good before, and thought to herself that sometimes it seems to her that a completely different young man is sitting in front of her. After a while, lunch was served in the cabin, and therefore the guys switched to this, especially since our hero was waiting for this moment for the entire flight. After looking at all the delicious things that were offered, the guy looked at it in surprise and anticipation. Within a minute, the student was eating with such an appetite as if he hadn't eaten anything for a week before. Xiaoxi carefully looked at the teenager and laughed softly with him. The young man, looking up from his meal for a while, asked what had happened, why the girl was behaving like this. The beauty noted that it's okay. Just in fact, the guy is the same. He has not changed at all, which made her very happy. And while the guys were eating, they were closely watched by a stranger who was sitting in the row opposite. The girl cleared her throat a little, but she did so to attract attention, even though she was in no hurry to say anything. Xiaoxi noticed the blonde woman who greeted with a gesture, even though she didn't understand the purpose behind it. She thought to herself that this stranger was looking at them as if she knew them, even though they didn't seem to have crossed paths before. Our hero noticed the reaction of his girlfriend, and therefore asked what happened to her, why she changed so much in her face. Xiaoxi asked the guy to take a look at the girl who was sitting nearby. She is very beautiful, and so much so that she is amazed by this fact. And then she added that she was looking at the young man intently and smiling, which startled the young man so much that the food almost fell out of his mouth. But, pulling himself together, the teenager replied that this was all nonsense, he just ate funny, and therefore they looked at him. After a while, the landing at Kyoto Airport was announced. Young people walking down the escalator saw that they were already met by Mr. Lee, who managed to get such a unique student, which he dreamed of. The man immediately greeted the children, saying that he was glad to see them in this wonderful city. But our heroes did not have time to say anything, because at that moment the stranger who was standing next to them also turned to the director. Xiaomo realized that this beauty knew a man, so he assumed that she would study with them. Mr. Lee was saying at that moment that it was a great honor for Anna University to have 3 of the best students in Jianbei province joining them at once this year. The young man didn't understand what this meant, and neither did Xiaoxi. So he noted that if he and his girlfriend were ranked first and third, then it must be this beauty. So Xiaomo turned to the blonde and asked her if she was probably the second student who managed to get a high score in the exams. The stranger coquettishly stated that she had heard about the guys, but today she sees them for the first time, and therefore is very happy about it. And then she added that up to this point, no one could surpass her by hinting at something. Giving her hand to our hero, the girl said that now it doesn't matter, because they will study together, and therefore she is happy to meet the guy personally. After a pause, the beauty added that she would be happy to learn from the young man. Although he, shaking hands, said that it is best to learn from each other, but suddenly the teenager's face twisted with horror, and for a moment it seemed to him that their new acquaintance was up to something bad, and therefore you need to be extremely careful with her. The man, seeing how the guys shake hands, said that he was glad that everyone met. And now it's time to go on the road. Pointing to the car, Mr. Lee noted that time was running out, but the university was already waiting. Opening the car door, the man asked the guys to take their seats. Xiaomo wasn't used to this kind of attitude, so it was something fantastic for him. Without a trace of embarrassment, the young man said that the approach to university students is much better than he could have imagined. Moreover, the guy was glad that they would go not just by car, but by Audi, which was a business-class car. Laughing, the blonde said that every year the best students come to the school, but for the first time in the history of high school, students managed to get the highest score. And she added that it was probably given to her from above to meet such a unique genius as Xiaomo. The young man did not like to stand out, and therefore noted that the girl praises him too much. Mr. Lee knew that they were still on the move, so he said that he would help the students with their luggage in the meantime, and they could get in the car. And he added that before registering, students will have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and therefore they should be ready for this. As he put the suitcases in the trunk, the man thought to himself that they usually don't even run around with the best of the best. But Xiaomo is a completely different matter. He is just a mathematical genius, since he was able to solve the top 5 most difficult hypotheses that he saw when he came to invite him to his place. Therefore, only such a brilliant student deserves to be received with all the honors of Anna University. After some time, finally all the people gathered were already in the car and were ready to go to school. And as the car started to pull away, the young man carefully looked at the people standing on the side of the road. Xiaomo thought about how good it was that they would get a car ride directly to their destination, so they wouldn't have to wait for transport like the rest of the students and go to the university. Sitting in the car, Xiaoxi understood that it was necessary to somehow establish contact, so she asked her new friend how many points she had scored. The girl was going to show off, and therefore said that she was given 736 points. But there was no surprise in the eyes of our heroine. Instead, she said that it was very annoying. However, the blonde pointed out that she didn't understand what was so annoying about it and immediately added that there was a gap of more than 10 points between her and Xiaomo. Even so, she was still no match for him. Hearing the conversation, the young man thought that Xiaoxi's gap with this girl is only 4 points, which is actually something offensive. And, looking out the window, he thought that the beauties had just met, and there was already a rivalry between them. At this moment, the teenager was approached by Mr. Lee, who immediately asked if the student had thought about further direction, because this is very important. The man said that often all students think about it in advance, but for a young man, Anna University made an exception, and therefore he still has a choice. Thinking about it, the teenager admitted that he had thought for a long time, but still decided to go to the Faculty of Foreign Languages with Xiaoxi. When the headmaster heard about this, he was shocked. He did not believe that such a talented student was not going to enter the mathematics department. Although he calmly stated that if the guy has no special preferences, then of course, any direction will suit. But he still unobtrusively advised to use his strengths. Xiaomo thought to himself that he could choose anything, since he had a system. Scratching the back of his head, the young man said that the man had seen his calculations, which is why he so wants the young man to go to the mathematics department. Then he added that he didn't want to sound cocky, but after what he'd been able to do, how could the math teacher still teach him anything useful? Thinking about it, the director caught himself thinking that the young man actually managed to solve those difficult problems on his own. Even none of their teachers and professors could do it. Despite this, the man did not let up, and therefore said that their university would still be able to provide a good foundation. Xiaomo explained that even if he chose the mathematics department, he thought that the undergraduate course would be a waste of time for him. Other than that, the rest of the students might not be happy with his presence. So he decided that he would still study English, and if he suddenly had problems with solving problems, he could ask the math teacher to help him. Laughing, Mr. Lee pointed out that this was actually a great explanation, but somehow he hadn't thought of it. The director did not want to interfere with the talented young man to go his own way, and therefore with joy in his voice said that all doors are open for the young man. He can do what he wants. After a while, the man informed everyone that they had already arrived. Once outside, the children carefully looked at the huge buildings that were right in front of them. Our hero was struck by the huge and well-groomed territory, which he immediately liked. This was also noticed by a new friend of our hero's, who said that this is just a luxurious campus. Xiaoxi also stated that this is exactly what this place looks like, which she already liked. The principal told the students that they could go and check into the dorm for the time being, and as for him, he would help them register. Turning to Xiaomo, his girlfriend remarked that they would be busy with this for the time being, and then suggested that they have lunch together. The young man did not mind, saying that he would wait for this moment. As he walked down the street, the young man wondered if the university life he had been dreaming of for so long had finally begun. The director didn't waste any time, so he immediately headed towards the main building to do what he had promised. This was done by the others, so our hero was already moving up the stairs in search of his room. Finding room 403, the young man abruptly opened the door, realizing that he was on the spot, and therefore it was possible to check in. Xiaomo immediately saw the guys who were sitting on their shelves and looking at the newcomer in surprise. But the newcomer did not lose his head, happily greeting everyone present. Zhang Xiaochuan was a good-natured young man, so he immediately said that he was glad to see the newcomer. So did Wang Fei, who immediately said that it was a good thing that someone else had come to see them. Pulling out a chair, a blonde man explained that the newcomer was welcome, especially since they had just one empty seat left. Xiaomo immediately decided to give his name, and once again said that he was happy to see everyone with whom he would be sharing this room. The blonde man, who still hadn't revealed his name, immediately shook the young man's hand and stated that his name was Zhao Tian. The young man explained that he was originally from the capital, after which he hesitated a little. A minute later, the student pointed to the other kids and introduced them again, just in case. Then noted that they were just deciding with the guys who would be in charge in their room. Raising his hand, Zhang Xiaochuan noted that he believed that the most important thing should be the one who is the oldest, so it would be fair. But Wang Fei shouted in a displeased tone that it was too simple. Why don't they do it in a completely different way? And then he suggested that it is best to choose the boss by the number of points scored on exams. So the most important will be the most intelligent. However, the decision was not made because the guys began to swear, accusing each other of being unfair. Our hero, watching all this, did not understand why suddenly young people started up on such a flat place, and therefore immediately called out to them. Smiling, Wang Fei thought that he didn't think any of these people were able to score more points than him. So he stretched and explained that he had 707 points, and even though they all went to this university, he doubted that there were any results that were higher than his own. But in the next instant, Zhang Xiaochuan laughed as loudly as he could, showing that he didn't need to think of himself as the smartest. Raising a finger, the young man said that it was very funny. The fact is that he has 708 points, of course. This is quite a bit more, but still, even 1 point makes a big difference. The opponent immediately turned green with anger because he did not expect such an unexpected turn. Lowering his head, he said out loud that he was just unlucky this time. After a moment, the boys turned their attention to the blonde man, who was standing off to the side and had already started coughing to be noticed. In an indifferent tone, Zhao Tian said that he had managed to score 716 points in the entrance exam. Now 2 of the students were watching the blonde man, knowing that they had failed to become the best, and therefore they said that it was most likely he who won among them all. Young people praised the student, saying that he was very smart, and our hero, in turn, just laid out his things. But inwardly, he thought that these guys' reactions were somewhat unnatural, as if they weren't too surprised that Zhao Tian had more points than them. Zhang Xiaochuan encouraged his friend, saying that he should accept that he seemed to be in last place. The disciple was still hoping for something, so he immediately turned to Xiaomo to ask what the result was. Continuing to lay out his things, the joyful young man announced that he had received 750 points in the exam. And while there was no argument or surprised looks, our hero added that, despite this, he does not care who will be in charge. The surprised guys couldn't believe their ears, so they looked at this student carefully for a while. Unexpectedly, Wang Fei asked how many points the teenager actually managed to score, because this simply cannot be. Xiaomo gravely noted that he wasn't lying. He actually had 750 points, and if they didn't believe him, they could look at the site, because all the results were publicly available. At this moment, Zhang Xiaochuan told everyone in the audience that it was actually impossible. It didn't happen. But the blonde immediately reached into his pocket, saying that it was best to do as their friend told them. Passing the phone to one of the guys, Zhao Tian explained that it was better to actually look on the internet to know for sure. Xiaomo saw his classmates gathered in a circle and discussed something there, although after a few minutes they all shouted in one voice that this teenager was not lying to them. The blonde man didn't know what kind of genius they had, even though at that moment Wang Fei was suggesting that they appoint a senior based on their age. Smiling, our hero asked without any malice, now the young people believe him and will not doubt his words. But there was no way to continue the conversation because Xiaomo heard his phone vibrating. It was Xiaoxi who reported that she was already downstairs. Looking out of the window, the guy shouted that he was glad to see the beauty, saying that he would be down in a minute. The children didn't understand who their new acquaintance was waving at, so they immediately ran to the window to see who the young man was communicating with. The young people were shocked that a real beauty came to Xiaomo, so they immediately began to envy him. The astonished Zhao Tian said that this goddess was simply gorgeous. It was impossible to take your eyes off her. This was also said by others, who thought that Xiaoxi must have been the first beauty of the school. Wang Fei realized that our hero did not just say hello to this girl, and therefore immediately asked what kind of relationship they were in when they met. Xiaomo smiled and happily informed his new friends that this was his girlfriend, and if they wanted to get to know her better, they could have dinner together. The blonde grabbed the guy's shoulders and immediately asked if the guys were really in a relationship. With a wink at Zhao Tian, the young man stated that this was actually true. Once again, the students looked at their roommate in surprise, as if this reaction would never get out of their habit. Suddenly, the blonde guy grabbed our hero by the shoulders and told Tom that there was definitely no point in thinking or arguing, because the main thing in their room would be Xiaomo, and this was not even discussed. The guys were happy that they had a boss. They said that now there would be no secrets between them. Our hero was surprised. He has no idea what these unfamiliar people are talking about. But they watched the student closely, saying that they wanted to know the secret ways to meet such charming girls. Going down the stairs, the students tried to persuade our hero to tell them, and also, if possible, show them how to quickly and easily get acquainted with beauties. Xiaomo didn't understand the rush, so he told the guys that they should have dinner first and leave other matters for later. For a few seconds, the young men looked at the guy in surprise and even embarrassment, but then they started to smile, realizing that if their boss said so, then he would definitely share something interesting. At this time, Xiaoxi was standing on the street, as well as a blonde, and the girls all said that they were finally waiting for the guys. A new friend of the guys said that it was time for them to go, because they were very hungry. The boys were glad that Xiaoxi didn't come by herself, but brought them such attractive girls when she was still a student. And all this happened even before our hero managed to tell the students some nuances about dating. Zhang Xiaochuan leaned toward his friend and told Tom in a low voice that now they also had a unique chance. Suddenly, the young man stepped forward and immediately turned to one of the girls, proudly saying his name. The other guys couldn't believe their ears and eyes. Moreover, Xiaomo even closed his eyes, realizing that this was too blatant. Wang Fei, who didn't want to appear any worse, put his arm around his friend's shoulder and said that he was also ready to meet, so he gave his name. It was obvious that the blonde did not like this treatment, and therefore the smile immediately disappeared from her face, and she greeted the young people in a dissatisfied tone. She immediately turned her attention to Xiaomo, asking him how much longer they would be standing outside. The guys who got to know each other so actively understood that they were ignored, and therefore they were very upset. Closing his eyes, Zhao Tian thought that his companions were still too inexperienced to really get to know anyone, and he decided to himself that this beauty is definitely not up to his friends. She needs a completely different person next to her. The young man felt absolutely confident, knowing that he definitely had a chance, because he knows how to handle girls. Moreover, Zhao Tian put on his glasses to look much more solid and thought about how they had all picked the wrong one. In the next instant, the blonde turned his attention to the brunette, who was standing a little to the side. The guy approached the beauty and immediately said in a confident tone who he was, where he came from, expecting the same from a stranger. Smiling, the girl was a little embarrassed. Despite this, she greeted the student. The friends who were watching were even more upset, so they immediately hugged each other and were about to start crying. As she approached Xiaomo, his girlfriend noticed that his roommates seemed to be quite interesting guys. The teenager did not answer. He realized that the greeting was already very long and therefore suggested that everyone go somewhere and have dinner, because it was already evening. After a while, everyone was already sitting in a small restaurant. Our hero complained about the fact that the guys chose a place where they serve hot food, although he did not like anything like that. The embarrassed brunette, who had never revealed her name, was now carefully picking up a small piece of meat. The same was true for another student, who was trying to fish something out of a large plate, but felt clearly uncomfortable among the others. Xiaomo wanted to think about something else, but in the next minute, the girl suggested that he try something, so she was already putting a piece in her mouth. And although our hero didn't like it very much, but next to Xiaoxi, he flourished. Moreover, he liked that she fed him. Suddenly, the awkward silence was broken by Zhao Tian, who informed everyone present that the school year would start with military training. The guy explained that he had heard that the instructors were particularly strict this year, and therefore it was necessary to be as careful as possible. The girls, hearing about this, immediately began to say that they were afraid of military training. Moreover, they have delicate skin, and therefore they are worried that it will burn in the scorching sun. But it seemed that the blonde had come up with something interesting, and therefore said that they needed to prepare. And, raising his glass, he explained that he and the guys had prepared a set of special training sessions, and therefore the beauties cannot worry, because they will share with them. The beauties smiled and immediately asked Xiaomo if he should be added to the general chat. The teenager was silent, but his girlfriend, who was sitting next to him, gently explained that this was not necessary. After that, there was another awkward silence at the table because the two young people didn't know what else they could talk about. Finally, our hero said that he also does not need any chats. The guys looked at their friend in surprise and asked him why he was against it. The young man immediately replied that the reason was that he and Xiaoxi were not required to attend these military classes. Surprised children first heard about this, and therefore asked if it was true that young people are exempt from military training. Zhao Tian explained that he was from the capital himself, but he had never heard of Anna University giving anyone any favors, not even the children of powerful parents. Xiaomo was smiling, a little embarrassed, but he explained that they had made an exception for them because they scored the highest points. Not all of the kids understood that this might play a role, although Wang Fei understood that the teenager had scored the highest score, something that had never happened before. The girls who were sitting nearby also didn't believe that anyone could pass the exam so well, even though they had heard about something similar on the news. The brunette who was sitting nearby explained that most likely the highest score was obtained for any one subject, but not for all at once because this is something incredible. Zhang Xiaochuan replied that Xiaomo actually got all the top marks. If anyone doesn't believe it, they can look it up on the internet. Closing his eyes, Zhao Tian desperately thought that now he would always look like a second-rate character compared to his acquaintance. After a while, the young people returned to their dorm. Zhang Xiaochuan stretched out on a chair and talked dreamily about how he found it hard to believe that there were so many beautiful girls in their class. And then he added that they are divinely beautiful. They are even difficult to get enough of. Turning around, Wang Fei reminded him not to forget that one of them was already occupied, although he immediately said that there was no one more beautiful to him than Enron, even though he was afraid that a serious fight would break out for her heart. In the next instant, the fat man ran up to our hero and called him the boss. The guy admitted that he fell in love with the beauty at first sight, and therefore, it is possible that Xiaoxi can somehow help with the solution of this issue. Running up to Xiaomo, another young man immediately shouted that this Fei didn't need to be listened to. It was better to let the boss's girlfriend set him up with that beauty. It would definitely be useful. The young man explained that he had known Enron for less than a day, and therefore had no idea how this would all happen. Zhao Tian immediately suggested that they create a men's chat, where you can add girls to chat with them. For a moment, the teenager thought, he decided that they should have had a group chat, although at the same time it would be best to deal with this at tomorrow's couple. But the blonde said that this is not what they need. It should be a chat with interesting girls, which will not be devoted to studying. Smiling, the young man immediately understood the intentions of his new friends, and therefore noted that this can be solved somehow. Picking up the phone, the guy told everyone that he still wanted to check with Xiaoxi. If no one was against it, then he could come up with something about it. The guys looked at their boss with impatience, hoping that he would succeed after all. Young people said that it would be incredibly cool, because then they would be able to be in touch all the time. In the very next minute, Zhao Tian was added to the chat, who also talked about how it was actually very cool. The blonde also pursued his own goals regarding this chat, and therefore immediately began to search for the girl he needed in the list. The brunette saw the message, and therefore immediately began to answer something to her new friend. Zhao Tian thought that he also seemed to like Cholin, so he could continue to communicate further with her. Hearing the guys downstairs discussing something, our hero noted that everyone likes it. But do not forget that tomorrow everyone is waiting for school, and therefore you need to get a good night's sleep. Despite the fact that the young people said that they would do as the boss said, they themselves continued to hold phones in their hands, actively corresponding with someone. The next day, at the appointed time, all the students had already started to gather in the classroom, afraid of being late on the first day. Xiaoxi didn't wait for the guy, especially since they lived in different blocks, so she already went to the office. The guys who were already sitting in the audience immediately noticed the beauty, and therefore immediately began to discuss her. But it didn't matter to the girl because she already had the person who was the only one for her. Her classmates, who didn't know this, said among themselves that she would be with the one who first looked at her, and therefore again began to argue among themselves. Xiaomo was walking into the study room with his new companions, talking about something. Seeing her boyfriend, the beauty immediately called out to him, telling him to sit down next to her. The young people who had already shared Xiaoxi among themselves now couldn't understand why she was communicating with some incomprehensible student who came in late at all. Wang Fei, who had overheard the conversation, explained in a languid voice that this beauty could be forgotten altogether because she was already busy. Upset guys, disappointed not once, immediately began to break the comedy, saying that in this case they will never be able to love anyone again. At that very moment, Enron appeared in the office, chewing gum and looking not at all like a lady, but like a cheeky girl. Young people who just a moment ago complained that everything was gone came to life again, saying that their hearts can beat again. Therefore, the students began to raise their hands, vying to say that the seat next to them is free, and therefore the beauty can sit wherever she wants. But for a moment, the blonde stopped next to our heroes and looked at them carefully. Xiaoxi turned her head somewhere. As for the young man, he just sat there and watched. Sitting down next to the guy, the girl greeted only the young man and called him master. The guys watching this scene were angry. They did not understand why this young man decided to take all the beautiful girls. Wang Fei also couldn't understand why his friend was doing this, even though he wasn't actually doing anything. Only Zhao Tian wasn't going to chase after pretty pictures, so he walked over to Cholin and greeted her. The young man tried to talk casually with the girl, although she was a little embarrassed. Privately, the young man thought that he had always been a smart guy, and now he does not consider himself an exception. You really need to communicate with someone who is close to you, and not with someone who is just beautiful. At the same time, Xiaomo carefully observed the blonde who was just smiling even though she remained silent. Our hero did not understand why Enron was sitting next to her, and therefore openly asked her why she sat down with him, if the audience is almost empty and you can choose any seat. The girl carefully looked at the classmate and immediately asked a counter question about why she can't sit in this place, if it is also free. Xiaomo, hearing this answer, asked again if the beauty didn't notice all the murderous looks that were directed in his direction. But Enron didn't answer right away. Instead, she was a little embarrassed, even though she was smiling. Suddenly, the girl was called out by Xiaoxi, who was pinching her boyfriend at the same time. In the very next minute, the student admitted that she sat down here for a reason. The fact is that she wants to ask the young man for something. Closing his eyes, the young man thought about why this blonde had chosen him, because there were other people in the group. But after that, Xiaomo decided that he was a gentleman, so he immediately asked what kind of service he was talking about. The girl said that she did not want to go through military training, and therefore she would like our hero to ask Director Lee to release her from these classes. For a moment, the beauty paused and carefully looked at her classmate. Although after a moment Enron said that the guy should promise her that he would talk to his superiors, only on this condition will she sit down. The young man was silent. He closed his eyes because he understood that this was not an easy request. Moreover, the conversation was conducted for him in advance. That is why the guy asked a friend why she herself should not approach Rector Lee and tell him personally about this. But the girl didn't say anything. Instead, she winked at her classmate and said that she was counting on him. Xiaoxi tried to say something, but she didn't have time to do so, because the female student just then pointedly got up and left. After a moment, the beauty waved to our hero and wished him all the best. Once again, Ergon strode away, still chewing her cud. After a while, the girl lingered near one of the desks. It was clear that she had already chosen a suitable place for herself. Seeing this, the young people immediately happily started talking about how they had a unique chance to win this blonde. As for Wang Fei, he thought that their boss was always on time, so he was dating two girls at once. A minute later, a young teacher entered the office and immediately greeted everyone present. And again, the guys started talking about the fact that this university has not only beautiful students but also teachers, adding that they were lucky to study at this faculty. The young employee said that her name is Liu Feng, and she will teach the students a foreign language, which is the main subject. The lecturer noted that everything is new for the children, and therefore she wants them to get to know each other better, as well as get used to the new environment. Therefore, the teacher wanted each student to introduce themselves, as well as tell a little about themselves. A red-haired guy who was sitting nearby thought that he had the best passing score among applicants of this profile of training. The choice of the faculty was influenced not only by knowledge, but also by the fact that it is usually here that you can meet a lot of beautiful girls. Standing up from his seat, the young man said that his name is Xu Hongchai. He is the fourth in the ranking among the Beihai province. If there are difficulties with the subject, you can contact him. He is also fond of basketball. Listening to this boring story, the other students thought that the young man decided to just show off himself. As for Xu Hongkai, he kept saying that he had an interest in music, so he would be happy to join the music club. Realizing that this long speech was finally over, the boys took a deep breath. A few seconds later, another student got up, who, although embarrassed, managed to tell us something about himself. Behind this student, a girl also stood up and said something. At the same time, Xu Hongchai was thinking that all these students were just jealous of him, because there were no more people like him in the group. But the guy didn't care at all, self-confident. He believed that he could achieve everything he wanted. The young man turned his gaze to Enron, who was sitting nearby, knowing that this girl should be with him. In the next instant, the beauty who heard the group chanting her name got up and gave her name. The student either had nothing to say about herself, or she did not think it necessary to do so, and therefore immediately sat down in her seat. The guys who were waiting for some bright performance were a little upset, although some people thought that it was concise, and therefore worthy of such a girl. Privately, the teacher decided that if the student didn't say anything about herself, then she would be the one to do it. The teacher said that Enron has an impressive passing score, which makes her the second best student in Jianbei province. The guys immediately said that this girl is really cool. Moreover, she is not arrogant, which was doubly pleasant. And then one of the students added, "The beauty is modest and smart, unlike someone who took fourth place." Despite this bragging as if it was the first, after that, it was Xiaoxi's turn, who immediately got up from her seat and talked a little about herself. The teacher noted that this student also has an excellent result, which is impossible not to mention. The reason is that the girl is ranked third in Jianbei province this year, which is very commendable. Many young people were happy that there were such beautiful girls in their group and such smart ones, those with whom they would spend 4 years together. After that, it was the turn of our hero, who got up from his seat and immediately said his name. The student did not know what to tell him about himself, because he did not like to brag, and therefore in the end only noted that he loves basketball, but in general is an ordinary teenager. Sitting down in his seat, Xiaomo heaved a sigh of relief, because he didn't like such moments and felt awkward. As in the case of other students, the teacher decided to say that our hero is the first in the province. Moreover, he is the first in the entire history of exams who received the highest score. That is why the lecturer wanted to nominate this particular person for the position of head of their group. Everyone in the audience was literally green with envy, because they hadn't expected anything like this. Jumping up from his seat, Xu Hongchai started cursing, saying that the young man could easily go to the Department of Information Technology or Finance. The guy didn't understand what a person with such outstanding abilities was doing in an ordinary foreign language department. At the same time, a conversation was going on in the corridor that Mr. Li managed to find a student who solved the most difficult mathematical problems. Despite this, the student chose foreign languages for some reason. The rector said that Xiaomo is a young man with character, but he made his own choice, which he considers. Another bespectacled man noted that he could hardly believe that an ordinary high school student could solve the hypothesis, which is almost unbelievable. As she moved down the corridor, Xiaoxi congratulated the youth on being the group leader now. But our hero honestly admitted that this is not his. Firstly, he has never done this before. And secondly, he does not really like it. The girl laughed. She said that there was nowhere to go anyway, so you will have to learn everything that was previously inaccessible. The young man understood that nothing could be fixed anyway, so he said that he would try. Unexpectedly, the teenager decided to confer with the girl about Enron's request. He did not know what he should do best in this case, because the request is very bold. For a moment, the student thought, because in fact, not every day they ask for such a thing, but also unfamiliar people. Xiaoxi honestly admitted that at first the classmate seemed cute to her, but then she began to behave like this. And after that, the young man noticed that this blonde was clearly annoying his girlfriend. and therefore just wanted to refuse her. But Xiaoxi snapped that they were from the same province after all, and therefore needed to help her if there was such a possibility, and heard that the guy was going to talk to Rector Li, and immediately, in the next instant, the beauty declared that she had come across such a cute young man. Smiling, the girl said that it was time for her, as a guy, to go about her business, and therefore they would see each other later. Xiaomo was approaching the office when he heard several men arguing about how the commission wanted to present the university in the best possible light. He paused for a moment, because he didn't know if he should go any further. The indignant man continued to say something about how important it is to know everything in moderation. He added that perhaps no one knows that the BYD hypothesis is one of the 5 most difficult problems in the mathematical world. Mr. Li assured Mr. Chen that he understood everything, that it was clear to everyone that the teacher took everything about his subject seriously, and that this was why he was concerned. It seemed that the professor actually understood his colleague, but he did not understand why in this case the gifted student did not choose the mathematics department. The rector stated that he, in turn, could not force the student to choose something that he did not like. Chen immediately shouted out whether Mr. Li had accidentally conspired with this young man, and then added that the man probably understands how this can affect the prestige of the university. The headmaster didn't like that he wasn't trusted, especially since there was another master. So he pointed out that a student like Xiao Mo, on the contrary, increases the prestige of their university and not the other way around. While adjusting his glasses, the principal immediately asked what the student in question was doing. The young man greeted everyone present and immediately told Mr. Li that he would like to talk to him about military training, if possible. The man didn't know how to behave because he was embarrassed, so he immediately started coughing nervously. The professor was angry at this, so he asked his colleague not to cough on him. And then, taking off his glasses, he said that the student does not distract them, and therefore can speak freely in front of everyone that he wanted. Xiaomo kindly requested that the principal release another person from their classes if possible. Chen, who was already on edge, started yelling at the student, saying that he had no right to ask for such favors at all, adding that the boy would behave like this at home. After hugging our hero, Mr. Li told Tom quietly to come see him the next day so they could have a normal conversation. Suddenly, the professor, who heard the student's name, suddenly asked if the famous Xiao Mo was really in front of him. When there was no answer, he shouted that he would find out everything today, and therefore no one would be able to reproach him with disrespect. He would be able to find out what this mathematical genius was capable of. After that, the professor, without explaining anything, grabbed the young man by the arm and told Tom that they were going together. The headmaster shouted after him that Mr. Chen was a dogmatic man known for his tenacity, and that he would not let Xiao Mo down now. The rector turned to another Mr. Li, asking him to make sure that everything went well. He, in turn, said that pure gold is not afraid of flames. If this boy is actually as smart as a colleague claims, in this case he has nothing to worry about. Besides, the score on the entrance exam confirms this. After that, he noted that there is no need to focus on this, since they have other important things to do, and this can wait. Inwardly, the principal thought that he was hoping for the student he had vouched for, otherwise Lao Chen would be even angrier than he was now. Meanwhile, the professor took our hero to his office and immediately ordered him to start writing an explanation of the BYD hypothesis. The young man was angry, not liking that this man was treating him so disrespectfully. It seemed that the math teacher wasn't really joking, because he had already prepared sheets of paper and a pen and was asking if the student was ready to start work. But that wasn't what surprised him the most. He looked carefully at the professor's hand. Immediately, the young man looked around the office, which was poor and shabby. Lao Chen didn't understand why the disciple was hesitating, so he once again told Tom that he could start. Xiaomo thought to himself again that it seemed like there was a famous scientist sitting in front of him who had dedicated his life to science and work. It was all for the good of the country. However, now something else was important. The teenager had to show everything that he could, and therefore concentrated on solving the problem. Time passed, but the guy did not stop. He carefully pushed aside a piece of paper after a piece of paper. Taking off his glasses, the professor looked at this student carefully, as if trying to find something in him. Lao Chen looked at what was already written out of the corner of his eye, because he wanted to know if there was any point in keeping this boy in his office any longer. The teacher was interested in the young man's work, so he started reading it. Suddenly, the man screamed as loudly as he could. He said it couldn't be happening at all. It was impossible. After a while, the rector and Mr. Li walked down the corridor. They realized that Professor Chen had not been seen or heard from for a long time, and therefore they began to worry. Laoli went to the door and immediately knocked on it, wondering if the man was doing well. When no one answered, the man took the liberty of opening the door, surprised by what he saw. A happy Lao Chen was standing next to the disciple, smiling and saying something to the disciple that seemed incredible. The man was asking if such a talented guy would be willing to become his disciple. The strange thing was not that the teacher wanted such a student, but that Lao Chen could smile at all. After a while, sitting in the study, The professor told Oyu Chen that he had a promising student. The man said that at such a young age, the young man was already able to solve 5 of the most difficult problems in the world, and therefore he was very lucky that this student agreed to study with him. Such an excellent student needs special and careful care. Oyu Chen was thinking irritably to himself that this old geezer had been talking about the new student for half an hour, as if there was nothing else to say or no one else to say. The young man knew that in such an environment, he would definitely not be able to finish his work. The guy didn't want to sound rude, so he asked if it was really possible to solve 5 of the most difficult tasks in a short time. Maybe just in case it's worth making sure that the solution is correct. Suddenly, Lao Chen thought about it. He said that some of the evidence actually seemed a little inaccurate to him. So he said that he would go to the lab to use the main computer, which would allow him to check some of the data so that he would know everything for sure. But suddenly, the student volunteered to deal with such moments himself. Getting up from his seat, the man said that it is not surprising that Oyu Chen is so eager to go there, because this is how the beautiful Miss Lu works, with whom the young man is in love. Clutching his head, the student began to justify himself, noting that he simply admired the talent of this girl and nothing more. The man went back to the table and said that if the student was so eager, then he didn't mind, just wanted to write a letter to let everyone know that Oyu Chen had come on his behalf. Lao Chen asked the guy to keep all this information between them for now, because if there were any inaccuracies in Xiaomo's argument, then the situation might be bad for his reputation. In the future, there may be unnecessary criticism, and therefore it is necessary to make sure that problems do not arise right now. It was not clear to the student why the professor could not be silent for a moment, constantly mentioning this new student. Oyu Chen decided that in any case, he would not respect this boy. Moreover, he would not let him stand in his way. After a while, the young man was already in the laboratory, and when he saw Miss Lu coming to meet him, he immediately said that he was glad to see her. Other guys also discussed this beauty. They said that she is the most talented girl. She is slightly over 20 years old. Despite this, the beauty has a great reputation internationally. Only the young people didn't like the fact that someone was hanging around the young miss. They didn't know this guy very well, but they assumed that he was a research student, although they were sure that he was a real incompetent. After handing the folder to the girl, the student explained that he came on behalf of Professor Chen, and therefore would like to use the main computer. Looking at what was written, the beauty was surprised that the teacher managed to prove such a complex hypothesis. But after a moment, she exclaimed that the professor was not writing about herself, but about some student of Xiaomo. The young man was angry. He didn't understand why Mr. Chen would want to talk about this boy in the letter. Ms. Lu said that she didn't think that the professor, who had previously avoided email, who claimed that it was very difficult to understand her work, now decided to seriously engage in the promotion of his student. Oyu Chen scratched the back of his head and noted that, of course, he might have doubts about this kid, because it was necessary to find out everything thoroughly. The girl looked at the student carefully but did not know what to say to him. And the young man went on to explain that they say that this person deliberately chose the faculty of a foreign language instead of mathematics. He simply forged the results of exams out of fear that he would be discovered. And then he said that he personally did not suspect this guy of anything. These are all the most common rumors. Smiling, Miss Lu remarked that she had never met anyone so impudent before. Then she added that this was the first time that Professor Chen's student had ever turned out to be a fraud, and therefore this letter should not be considered authentic. The guy was looking at this girl carefully, and he was glad that Xiaomo, no matter how hard he tried, would not be able to get around him. Adjusting his glasses, Oyu Chen thought that in the competition between the two of them, he wouldn't even let the boy take second place. The reason was that the young man was going to tell an international math group about the scam. The guy got carried away, and therefore with each passing minute his thoughts led further away, despite the fact that he was not familiar with how talented our hero was. Oyu Chen wanted to show his opponent his place, confident that there was no one smarter than himself. At this time, in the men's dorm, in the room where Xiaomo lived, the guys were actively discussing something. In addition, the young people were bustling around. Each of them was busy with some business of their own. In response to Wang Fei's question about what Zhang Xiaochuan was doing, he said that since he had nothing to do and was still standing at the entrance, he could take out the trash. But instead of understanding, the young man began to shout that in this case, they still need to change beds. Although after that, he is not going to clean for anyone. After only a minute, the students were already shouting so loudly that it seemed the entire dorm could hear them. Xiaomo, who didn't understand why they were making friends, said in a calm tone that the sooner they finished cleaning up, the sooner they could go to dinner. The blonde man approached the boys, asked them if they had heard the class leader, and added that perhaps this was the right thing to do. It seemed that these words really affected the guys, because they immediately turned around. But suddenly, Zhang Dawei asked his classmates why they were looking at him so strangely. Young people who a moment ago were ready to kill each other now said that the blonde man does not respect the boss, laughs at him. Sarcasm is heard in his words. The teenager didn't like quarrels or arguments, so he just smiled and took a deep breath. At the same moment, the blonde man spoke up. He asked his friends why they abruptly began to switch hands on him, because he just wanted to explain something to them and nothing more. After a moment, our hero asked the guys why they were acting so strange since he came to the dorm. It was Zhao Tian who spoke up again, saying that it was probably because the young people just wanted to get close to Enron. But the comrades, spreading their hands, declared that they respected their boss and therefore would never have acted in this way. But the blonde man said that one way or another, there are those who are not happy that it was Xiao Mo who took over the position of group leader, and they must be throwing mud at him behind his back right now. But the young man noted that he does not want to think about it. It absolutely does not concern him. Everyone does as they see fit. But the guys did not understand why the young man behaves like this, because all ill-wishers can easily spoil the reputation of a student. Xiao Mo, with a smile on his face, once again happily said that the words of bad people meant nothing to him. He would just try to be a good headman, believing that this was the most important thing. With some surprise, Zhao Tian noted that perhaps this was how a strong person's mindset worked. Other friends also said that their boss is so cool that no evil plans will work against him. Before they could finish, Xiao Mo saw that he had received a message, so he was distracted by it. All of a sudden, the guy shouted that Enron was texting him again, saying that she seemed to be doing everything she could to make him lose his temper. On the way out of the office, Miss Liu told a guy that she had completed the test calculations, so she asked him to pass this information to Professor Chen. The young man did not understand what this meant, but the beauty said in a lazy tone that these were calculations that proved the BYD hypothesis, and they were correct. When the young man heard about this, he immediately said that he understood everything, and therefore he immediately went to Lao Chen. In the next second, the student looked at what was written, not believing his own eyes. Suddenly, the young man turned around and asked the girl again if she had made a mistake, adding that this was one of the most difficult tasks in the whole world. The beauty did not give a direct answer to the question. She only proudly stated that if she were in his place, she would not keep the professor waiting. Realizing that he was wrong, the young man immediately ran forward, noting that he would immediately deliver everything to the teacher. As for the girl, she was shocked, even though she didn't understand what the main reason for this was. The girl was surprised that such a talented student did not even try to apply for the mathematics department, although he could have done it. But if what Oyu Chen said is true, then this guy did something dishonest, rigged the exam results. In the late afternoon, moving along the corridor, Lao Chen asked our hero if it was true that he was in this place for the first time. He turned around and announced that he was going to show the student the most advanced computer in all of China, so that in the future the young man could use it to test his calculations. The guy naively said that now he understands why they came to this place. However, the professor admitted that this is only one of the reasons why he took the student with him. The second is that he wants to introduce him to another young genius of their university. Opening the door, the man immediately stated that his reason was just the same in this place. The teacher explained that this girl works tirelessly. However, as always, the girl, hearing that someone came into the office, immediately turned around and greeted the professor, saying that she was glad to see him. Miss Liu looked at our hero, whom she didn't know, in surprise, so she asked who he was. The young man immediately shouted with admiration that he knew the beautiful Lu Jiyue in absentia, which the professor talks about all the time. The young man immediately said that he was pleased to meet you, and then gave his name. As Xiao Mo stretched out his hand, he saw that the beauty had closed her eyes and wasn't even looking at him. The student proudly stated that the young man had not yet managed to enter, but was already trying to ingratiate himself with everyone. The man didn't understand what had happened to the girl, so he asked her directly about it. Xiao Mo understood that this could be the case, but it didn't upset him at all. Moreover, he was used to something like this. In the next instant, Lu Jiyue handed the paper over to her mentor and asked him to take a good look at it. The student explained that the calculations on the BYD hypothesis that were sent to her gave her some ideas. Picking up a piece of paper, the teacher thought that this girl had never behaved so rudely, and therefore he did not understand what was wrong with her. But the next moment, when the professor began to read what was written, he was very surprised. Lao Chen turned to our hero and asked him to look at what he himself sees. The angry girl immediately started shouting. She asked her mentor why he was showing this information to the boy. Scratching his head, the teenager did not understand why the student was so unhappy, because he did not do anything wrong to her. At that moment, the young man noticed that a system board had appeared in front of him. The guy understood that the system had prepared a new task for him. It was to establish a relationship with Lu Jiyue. But first you need to besiege her a little so that she does not get conceited. That is why our hero carefully looked at the sheet and, turning to the professor, pointed out the equation that was incorrect. The girl screamed even more after these words. She asked what the guy was saying. The man, who loved justice in everything, asked the student not to shout, explaining that he actually found a mistake. And while the beauty started to say something in her own defense again, Mr. Chen asked her to carefully look at the third line. At this moment, Xiaomo spoke up and remarked that he was afraid that the concept presented by Miss Lu wasn't fully thought out, so it was better to go in a different direction. After that, the young man quite calmly told how he sees it. Not much time passed, and the professor was already applauding the student, saying that this is actually wonderful. Lu Jiwei finally admitted that she didn't expect such good offers from the young man. It's actually not bad. Scratching his head, our hero explained that he was just inspired. There's nothing complicated about it. Bowing to the guy, the girl asked for forgiveness for the fact that she initially treated him incorrectly, moreover, doubted his knowledge and skills. But then the beauty noted that she still has one question that she would like to ask. Xiaomo carefully looked at this student. He had no idea what to expect from her. After that, the girl asked why the young man allows such a talent to disappear at some faculty of foreign languages. And then she added, "Why don't the student transfer to physics and mathematics? Because he doesn't want all his school years to be wasted." Our hero carefully looked at this girl, thinking about what to say to her to make it sound convincing. So the young man took his time and asked a counter question about what the university is for Miss Lu personally. Lu Jiu thought for a while, and then replied that the university was probably one of the stages of the educational system for her. The teenager could not restrain himself, and therefore said that it seems to him that all this is not the same, because the essence of the university is not in one thing, but in several components, such as professors, laboratories, and other nuances. He wants to say that choosing a faculty is not the end point of his training, because you can study any subjects that are interesting. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as an interdisciplinary exam. The girl again said that the first thing you need to do is have a clear idea of what you want to do in life. The young man again explained that he entered the Faculty of Foreign Languages only because he wanted to be close to someone dear to him. And then he added that they are students, that it is important for them to get a good education. But first of all, they are people who have feelings. If it wasn't for his family and friends, the young man would never have been able to get this far. It was thanks to Xiaoxi that he began to work very hard and achieved what he has in terms of education. The professor, turning to the student, said that he could not say that he agreed with all the words of this guy, but that he reminded him of what he had wanted to say for a long time. Lu Jiwei has almost been living in the lab for the past 6 months, which means that she hasn't been home for a long time, hasn't called her parents in a long time. After these words, the beauty looked at the man in amazement, although she did not say anything. And the man continued to say that sometimes too much mental stress can harm the flow of thought. Taking breaks will be an opportunity to allow the mind to be more flexible. Smiling, the beauty said that she didn't think that a person like Xiaomo would be able to teach her anything. The young man was smiling, even though all his attention was focused on the system's scoreboard that had appeared in front of him again. After a while, our hero returned to his dorm room. The system informed the guy that his mission was successfully completed, and therefore our hero was interested to know what reward awaits him. Pressing the button, the young man knew that they were some kind of fiery eyes. Thinking about it, the student tried to figure out what he could do with such a skill, although he did not decide anything for himself. At this time, interesting things were happening on the territory of the laboratory. Sitting on the street, two guys talked about how there are rumors around the university that one boy managed to prove one of the most difficult hypotheses in the world. Now this student is a student of Professor Chen. Oyu Chen was upset when he heard about this because he hadn't expected this to happen. But in the next instant, the young man forgot absolutely everything because he saw Miss Lu in front of him. The girl was moving down the street, although she didn't seem too happy about it. Approaching the student, the guy said that he had not seen her outside the laboratory for a long time. The beauty admitted that she decided to follow the advice of Xiaomo and the professor, and therefore wants to see how rest will affect her mental flexibility. The guy who didn't know anything about the conversation was now thinking that this girl was acting strangely. Pulling on his glasses, the young man asked if the girl had already met Oyu Chen, noting that he had said that it was better not to trust this person. And again he said that this student was tricked into entering the university, and therefore it is not clear what else he can do. But Lu Jiu asked the guy not to talk about our hero like that, saying that he was actually a very talented boy. Suddenly, the beauty turned around and walked away, saying that now she would like to continue her walk. The confused student was standing in the middle of the courtyard. He didn't like what had happened, so he turned to the girl again. Realizing that the beauty was not going to waste time on the young man, he just stood there and watched her go. The guy knew that Xiaomo had crossed his path again, so he thought about how he wanted to be gentle with him because they were studying at the same university. However, things are very different now, so Oyu Chen planned to act differently. Looking at the cards that were lying on the table, our hero continued to think about why he needed the ability of fiery eyes, what it would give him. The young man did not look away. It seemed that this method allowed him to concentrate his attention successfully. Suddenly, the disciple saw that there was a king of hearts and an ace in front of him. At that moment, it dawned on the young man, and he realized that X-ray vision was now available to him, which was something incredible. He wasn't sure, So he turned to Wang Fei and asked him to help him with something. The student did not understand what had happened, but our hero immediately said that the classmate just needed to sit down next to him. The young man asked his friend to turn his back on him, and then carefully shuffled all the cards. The young man did not understand why this was necessary, so he asked if it was true that this was some kind of magic trick. This wasn't entirely true, but Wang Fei decided to do as he was asked, thinking that the boss, no matter how smart, wouldn't be able to trick him. After pulling out 2 cards, the joyful comrade began to talk about the fact that now the most difficult task of guessing is ahead. It seemed that Xiaomo had never tried so hard before. Realizing that he was very eager to guess, the guy tensed. It seemed to him that something unusual was actually happening to his eyes. And in the next minute, our hero shouted that he definitely sees the 2 of diamonds on the left, as well as the 3 of clubs on the right. The surprised friend did not believe that such a thing was even possible, and therefore asked how it was achieved. Xiaomo honestly admitted that he just had a sharp eye, although he didn't explain what that might mean. But Wang Fei, realizing that this was surprising, started looking for the markings on the maps, saying that they should be there. The young man, in turn, thought that this skill could be a great help. The student wanted to think about something else, but the next minute his phone rang, so he was distracted. Xiaomo saw that Professor Chen was calling, so he couldn't help but answer it. The young man was waiting for some kind of calm greeting, but instead, the teacher shouted that he didn't know where the student was, but he needed him to come to him immediately. The fact is that some anonymous person accused our hero of fraud, and now an international delegation is going to them to clarify the circumstances. The members of this organization are serious. They don't care that the guy was able to prove the hypothesis on his own. They are sure that the young man gave out other people's records as his own. Standing outside the door, Ou Chen listened intently to this conversation and was glad that things had turned out this way. The ill-wisher was sure that the young man would disgrace all the members of the Chinese Mathematical Society. Xiaomo was surprised by this incident, but he knew that he would not make excuses because he did everything himself. Although I knew that scientists from all over the world can be divided into 4 classes, the first ones have limited knowledge. The maximum that they can get is patents for the production of something. Second-class scientists make groundbreaking discoveries, and their research papers are published in prestigious journals. Third-class scientists are one step away from reaching the limit of human knowledge, and they have enough skills to organize a whole set of theories and ideas to pass on to the younger generation. There is also a 4th-grade teaching that can introduce humanity to a new field that goes far beyond the limits of knowledge. And all this will definitely be recognized by all other scientists on Earth. To date, there are no more than 100 scientists who would belong to the 4th class. After a while, several influential people gathered in the main conference hall. The professor didn't expect to see all these scientists so soon. He was worried because there were 2 second-class scientists and 1 third-class scientist among them. The director told Lu Zhiyue that someone had reported to these people that China had proved the BYD hypothesis. The beauty said that the responsibility was shifted to a young student to make him a university star. It's just ridiculous. And the person who sent the anonymous letter is one of the few confidants with whom this secret was shared. As the scientists chatted among themselves, Lu Zhiyue thought that she understood who might have reported such a case. A second-class scholar who was from the Starbust Kingdom was the first to start the conversation. Yamamoto, who was a 3rd-grade scholar, talked about how he couldn't not come when he heard about such a unique piece of news. It just so happens that he himself recently completed the last improvements regarding the hypothesis. Hearing that the scientist had managed to prove the second most difficult hypothesis, the woman standing next to him was immediately surprised. Handing over his papers to his colleagues, the man said that they could see for themselves if they didn't believe him. Our heroes carefully followed this conversation, realizing that, most likely, they will have a difficult time. The men carefully studied these papers, realizing that the information was not only valuable, but also very important. So, the young scientist proudly said that progress is encouraging, and therefore it will take him a week to finish the hypothesis he started. The woman said that if Yamamoto can do what he started, then he will definitely get the title of a 4th-class scholar. At this time, this person said that he had an amazing idea of how to make their meeting even more effective. The man said that he wanted that boy Xiaomo to take a look at his notes and try to bring them to a logical conclusion within a few hours. Lu Jiyue immediately shouted, saying that this was a completely different task that required a radically different approach. But Yamamoto calmly pointed out that if the young man failed, then he would cast doubt on the reputation of the entire university. The girl understood that whatever arguments she gave, they would still be superfluous. However, this did not have to be done. Entering the office, our hero happily informed everyone present that he was ready to try. Turning around, Lu Jiyue saw her new acquaintance, even though she didn't think he would dare to come. Xiaomo said with joy in his voice that he had heard everything the guests were saying. The girl was not happy. She was interested in whether after all this the young man still wants to try. because the complexity of the he hypothesis reaches a world-class level. It cannot be solved in 2 hours. At this moment, the student thought that the old man from Sakura wants to destroy the image of the Chinese academic community, and therefore our hero must prevent this. Suddenly, Yamamoto asked if this was really the great guy he had already heard about. So I immediately asked if it was true that the young man was ready to speak on behalf of the entire Chinese academic community. Lao Chen, who was a 4th grade scholar and also a mentor to a teenager, asked Xiaomo to do it for the honor of their country. After taking the papers, the young man carefully looked at them, and there was a certain wariness in his gaze, just like Lu Jiu's. The young man immediately activated skill activation and brainstorming, realizing that without it, he could not cope. At that moment, the old man turned to the girl and asked if she would like to transfer to their university in Sakura. And after a moment, he added that less than 2 hours remained before the destruction of the reputation of Anna University, and therefore its status would be questioned, and it would be difficult to find a new job abroad. The beauty was angry. She immediately wanted to say something unflattering to this guest, although she restrained herself. Our hero understood this perfectly well, and therefore with one movement stopped his friend, simultaneously turning to Mr. Yamamoto. The teenager immediately continued his sentence, saying that they would not cause any problems for their guests. Suddenly, he happily announced to everyone that he had already found a solution to his conjecture. The learned woman did not believe that such a thing was even possible, because only a few minutes passed, and during this time the student usually does not even have time to solve an algebra problem. But the young man proudly stated that it took him a couple of minutes to figure out this clumsy decision. The audience didn't like that some student called this decision clumsy. However, the guy did not care. Instead, he stated that he already had an idea of how to simplify the proof of this hypothesis. As he approached the blackboard, Xiaomo explained that he had decided to deviate from the method presented by Mr. Yamamoto. And then our hero asked all the guests to look carefully at the board. The university staff believed in this guy, and therefore were determined, knowing that now the young man will show something incredible. Only Yamamoto was shouting that there was an impudent person in front of them, so he would be happy to see Xiaomo's disgrace. He didn't expect anyone to take his word for it, but he knew that he would be able to surprise everyone, so he didn't pay attention to these words. After starting to write something on the blackboard, the student said that first of all, he wants to demonstrate a new formula. The young man explained that they had to draw a different conclusion from these calculations. After that, the guy told about everything that was written on the blackboard. The teenager noted that his way of solving is much easier, and also more effective. The second-degree scholar stood up when he heard what Xiaomo said, because it was something incredible. The woman sitting next to Yamamoto tried to ask him something, but he couldn't say a word. Holding the cup in his hands, the old man nervously repeated that it was simply impossible. It's impossible for a student to reach the level of a 4th-grade scholar at such a young age. Lao Chen, applauding the student, said that they, scientists, do not create a stir around their ideas, but simply calmly move towards the goal. He added that the formula for calculating the sum of numbers was created by Gauss at the age of 10, and at 24 he had already proved the right triangle theorem. Newton invented calculus when he was only 23 years old. Therefore, true geniuses begin to show their potential even in their youth. The woman herself thought that they are witnessing a historical moment. Therefore, this cannot but rejoice. After a moment, our hero approached the professor and addressed him. After that, he asked to remind the man what he had recently said. Xiaomo didn't wait for him to speak, so he reminded him that the old man was sure that in 2 hours, the reputation of the Chinese academic community would be ruined in the bud. The professor felt ashamed and humiliated, and therefore decided that in this case, it would be more appropriate to remain silent. However, the young man continued to note that the man was wrong here. That is, you can say that the humiliation is not waiting for their institution, but for Sakura. Professor Chen, who immediately approached our hero, sincerely said that, of course, he is on the side of his student. Although after a moment he added that he wanted to remind the young man that he is still a student. Professor Yamamoto is above the guy in status, so the student still needs to respect what this person does or says. Although it didn't matter to the professor himself, he knew that in any case, he was humiliated in front of an international organization. That was why Yamamoto was sure that everyone would laugh at him after this incident. At the same time, other scientists were discussing how they never thought that someone would be able to prove his hypothesis in such a short time. The members of the commission were convinced that this was a turning point for the entire world of mathematics, and therefore they wanted to tell others about it as soon as possible. As for the old man, he continued to reproach himself, saying that he was an ordinary loser. He is the man who will never be able to regain his former respect, because a new star has appeared, which eclipsed him with its radiance. Despite what our hero did, life for the other heroes went on as usual. While waiting for classes to start, the kids were actively browsing on their phones while sitting in the classroom. As they moved down the street, students shared the news that a real genius had appeared at their university. Ou Chen, who heard about this, thought to himself that he never imagined that this Xiaomo would actually turn out to be so smart. That was exactly what scared him, because he had no idea how he was going to get out of this situation. Entering the office, the young man was sure that the professor was there, so he asked if it was true that the professor wanted to see him. But instead of Mr. Chen, there were two students looking at him. With surprise in his voice, the student asked the guys what they were doing in this office. The girl immediately shouted that she had asked the professor to give them time to talk in private, adding that it was OU Chen who sent that anonymous statement. The young man knew that the truth had been revealed, so he tried all sorts of ways to tell Miss Liu that he had no idea what she was talking about. Holding up sheets of paper, the beauty explained that the members of the delegation had confirmed that the calculations regarding the BYD hypothesis were correct. But someone had convinced them that Xiao Mo had passed off someone else's work as his own. These people came here and demanded proof, and apart from her, Xiao Mo, and the professor, only OU Chen knew about this, and he had to keep this information a secret. Throwing the paper at the student, Liu Jiwei said that such behavior is not worthy of a graduate of one of the most prestigious universities in the country. The guy almost fell on his back. He realized that in such a situation it is hardly possible to say anything. Moreover, the girl continued to declare that the ill-wisher so easily succumbed to envy. Finally, the young man found the strength to say that he himself did not understand how it happened. The guy was sitting with his head bowed and wanted to say something else, but he couldn't find the right words for it. Once again, OU Chen spoke up, saying that his mind was simply blurred, and therefore he was sorry for what he had done. The beauty loudly shouted that she didn't need an apology from the ill-wisher. He should only ask for forgiveness from Xiao Mo. Turning in the direction of our hero, the student said that he was his older brother, which is why the young man is obliged to forgive him. Hearing about this, the teenager scratched his head because it sounded silly enough. After that, Xiao Mo said that he believed that Miss Liu had called him for an important matter. And then he added that it was such a small matter, which is not particularly worth talking about. The student looked at the young man in amazement. She did not understand why he was acting like this because he was framed. The same applied to the ill-wisher, who asked again whether it was really just a trifle for the young man. With anger in his voice, OU Chen shouted that it was as if the guy didn't care that his own life might have gone downhill. Our hero closed his eyes. In fact, he did not know what to say best in this case. Xiao Mo tried to say something because he was asked a question, but he couldn't find the right words. Suddenly, Xiao Mo stood up from his seat and happily declared that they had been working hard for a bright future all their lives. And, crouching down in front of the enemy, he explained that this incident was an unusual obstacle on the way to this future. That is why the young man managed to cross this barrier, and therefore he can move on. After a while, Xiao Mo was already sitting in his room with the guys, engrossed in reading the information on his phone. Wang Fei was talking about how who would have thought that his friend would be framed by an undergrad. Moreover, he personally wouldn't be able to forgive this person so quickly. Although Zhang Xiaochuan spoke up in the next second, he stated that he had a different opinion on the matter. He thinks that their boss is unrealistically cool, and therefore wanted to be happy for his friend. The young man said that he also heard how the guy managed to put the old man from Sakura in his place. The fat man spoke up again, remarking that their boss was a real university celebrity, so now, to meet girls, all he had to do was say that he was sharing a room with Xiao Mo. But the young man did not like all this, so he asked if his friends really wanted to bring him to a nervous breakdown. Classmates did not want to make our hero angry, and therefore noted that they say so only because the guy is really cool. The teenager smiled, saying that he would treat his friends to dinner if only they would leave him alone, and immediately said that he had just received the prize money. Zhang Xiaochuan didn't understand what kind of money he was talking about, so he asked this question as well. Stretching, Xiao Mo explained that proving the BYD hypothesis is often rewarded. It can be an international or national award in the form of a 7-figure or 6-figure sum. After hearing about this, the guys couldn't believe their ears. It seemed to them that this couldn't happen, because it was just a huge amount of money. The young man didn't want to discuss this topic, so he asked where Zhao Tian had gone and heard that he seemed to have gone to play basketball. A classmate explained that he had heard that today was a test match with a team from Teikoku University. The young man enthusiastically stated that he didn't know that Zhao had already been accepted into the team, which was good news. Wang Fei said that this was also a surprise for them, as it turns out that this student is not only smart, but also good at sports. He added that he was also a great guy from a rich family, but the boss was still 100 times cooler than him. In a tired tone, Zhang Xiaochuan said that there was nothing to be done about it. There could only be one boss. The rest of them could just accept it. After putting on his jacket, Xiao Mo told the young people not to even think about saying anything stupid. He immediately continued the sentence, saying that they should stop sitting in a stuffy room and go and watch the game. Leaving the room, the teenager explained that it didn't matter if it was a trial game or not, but the competitive spirit was still there. At this time, the basketball game was in full swing. The The guys from the local university team did everything possible to show the best result on their territory. The blonde guy was shouting at someone to pay special attention to defense, because it's an important part of the game. And it paid off because a minute later the ball was thrown into the basket, which gave the guys extra points. Wang Fei, who was worried about his friend, happily told him to continue playing in the same spirit. In the next instant, a girl looked at the two young men carefully. Approaching them closely, the stranger said in a dissatisfied tone that she did not understand what students from Anna University were doing here, because they should sit on the other side. Our hero immediately began to apologize, saying that they were a little mistaken. Suddenly, the girl looked at the guy and asked if it was the same Xiaomo. The other girls standing nearby, after hearing the young man's name, immediately came over to meet him in person. The beauties sincerely said that they were true fans of the young man. The team members saw that their fans were communicating with someone and immediately began to closely monitor what was happening there. The guys didn't like that their girls had switched to nerds, and they didn't know if there weren't enough basketball players to look at other people now. A blonde from another team also noted that sports at this university do not seem to be respected at all, because right at the game, all attention is paid not to the guys but to some guys outside the game. However, no one canceled the game, and therefore the opposing side immediately began to attack, realizing that it is possible and necessary to attack while there is such an opportunity. Suddenly, Zhao Tian fell to the ground, and the young men from his team immediately asked how he was feeling. Our hero, who had been following the match closely all this time, turned to the opponent and said that he had seen him hit the player on purpose. But the young man said in a cold tone that there was nothing to do in basketball without a physical confrontation. Therefore, if the student doesn't understand this, it's best for him to sit and just keep quiet. And then he added that maybe the guy wants to go out on the court and show how to play properly. One of the young men immediately shouted that Xiaomo wasn't part of the reserve team, so it was against the rules. But the opponent happily said that it makes no sense for them to stick to the rules, because this is a trial game. We can assume that it is an amateur one. The opponent said that if the guy is not satisfied with something, then let him come out and show how to play correctly. Our hero immediately approached his friend, and he told the boss not to pay attention to this person. He was just angry. The young man could see that Zhao Tian wasn't feeling very well, so he allowed him to catch his breath for a while. At the same time, the teenager shouted, "If the opposing team wants hard basketball, he will show them this basketball. Moreover, he will show what real sportsmanship is." The blonde man who heard this speech said that the boss does not need to be led to these provocations. It is superfluous. But the opponent shouted that if this student wants to play, then let him play. Only then you don't need to cry. Xiaomo, hearing that he was being laughed at, said that it was all nonsense. And the next minute, he took off his jacket and said that there would be no problems. They would just play a little. Then he added that he saw that the opposing team likes to beat people, but he does not use such techniques because he likes to win fairly. Stretching his arms, the young man talked about how he could easily score 100 points. Hearing about this, the ill-wisher began to laugh again, realizing that this is something completely unreal. But Xiaomo just coughed. He knew that he hadn't proved anything to anyone for a long time, so he just wanted to show what he could do. Suddenly the game started. The ill-wisher immediately rushed to the ball. As for our hero, he ran in the other direction. Turning his head, the student did not understand how this was possible, because the young man immediately ran to the right place. And in the next second, everyone noticed that the newcomer on the field had already managed to intercept the ball. At this moment, other members of the opposing team were also trying to figure out how the young man got this ball. The team leader shouted to the guys to stop the young man immediately, because he was rushing to the basket. The student saw that the defense of other guys was lined up in front of him, but he told them confidently that they would not succeed. He would still do what he had planned. Suddenly, the guy jumped over the young people who were right in front of them. It was hard to believe, but our hero threw the ball, which clearly hit the basket. The fans immediately cheered that this was one of the best shots, and therefore their boss, as usual, surprised everyone. Opponents were preparing to continue playing, and therefore noted that they needed to focus and closely monitor this young man. Running up to Xiaomo, the stranger wanted to say something to him, but he didn't have time to do it. The reason was that in some incredible way, the young man snatched the ball from his opponent. He didn't have time to figure it out, but he didn't have to, because the guy was already driving the ball. Xiaomo knew that surprise was the most important thing in this game, so he jumped up and sent the ball towards the basket again. The referee saw what was going on. She knew that the guys from Anna University were playing this game, and Teikoku, although they were losing, could still catch up with their opponents. The captain didn't like the way his team played, so he asked them why they didn't do anything. The guys only made excuses, explaining that this teenager plays very aggressively, they don't even have time to follow it all. But the blonde noted that this is all nonsense. Everyone sees that this young man can only throw the ball. He is afraid to go on the attack. And then he said that it was all easier than simple. Therefore, you need to try a little and win. Then he added that young people really want to lose with a difference of 100 points, which would be a real shame. Our hero saw that his opponents were starting to play differently, so he said out loud that it looked like they were trying to stop him. That is why the young man again decided not to wait for an opportunity, throwing the ball from the distance from which he had the opportunity. This was as accurate as possible, and therefore the guy noted that he was just doing a great job. The guys from the opposing team complained that this young man was too fast, and therefore they did not have the slightest chance to stop him in any way. The blonde man was angry. He had seen what this young man was capable of, and therefore did not understand how to outwit him. But suddenly the young man shouted, "If they can't defend, then they need to collect points, and the best way to do this is to attack." The young man said that they should definitely score the ball. The student was confident in his own abilities, and therefore led the ball towards the opponent's basket. But suddenly the blonde man stopped, startled by what he saw. The ball that was in his hands just a second ago was now in Xiaomo's hands, who seemed to be about to throw the item into the basket again. The student did not understand how this was possible. He said that it was not the first time that this young man had taken the initiative from them. But the commander did not give up, shouting that the guys just should not pay attention to this teenager because there are other areas where other players are standing. In such a situation, the young man knew that even a draw would suit him, so he ordered the team to act. But the other players on the Anna University team weren't as weak as they were said to be, so they also had a lot of skills. At this time, the guy again complained that Xiaomo can hold back 3 players at the same time, leaving 2 of them against 4 from the opposing team. And therefore, it is not clear how you can throw the ball in this situation. The captain was angry, he shouted, but did not understand how to act in this case. The blonde guy didn't want to look stupid, so he said that this nerd wouldn't be able to win anyway because they had a strong team. Time passed, but the competitors could not do anything. They were exhausted, but they did not have a plan. Lying on the floor, young people noted that they were more exhausted than ever because they had not run at such a pace for a long time. And only our hero held the ball and smiled, realizing that he did what he originally planned. Glancing at the scoreboard, the guy was happy to note that their team was ahead by 100 points, and this is exactly what he promised the opponents. But it was too early to stop, especially since the student was in a rush, so he decided to throw the ball again. A minute later, the referee announced that this was the end of the game, and the score was 59 against 159. So Anna University won. The guys, hearing this news, immediately began to rejoice, realizing that the victory was not so difficult for them. Friends of our hero, who wanted to avenge Zhao Tian because he was hit hard by a ball at the very beginning, said that they were initially confident that they would win, and by a large margin. The contestants looked carefully at the other students, but they were so exhausted that they couldn't say anything. In the next minute, the Teikoku team captain looked up because he saw Xiaomo standing in front of him. The young man immediately stated that he knew that the blonde man had deliberately pushed their team's player Zhao Tian. He immediately pointed a finger at the young man, who was looking at the teenager intently. Xiaomo said that the detractor should always remember that karma works 7 days a week. The girls were watching this conversation closely, but they didn't even think to interfere or say anything. And only in whispers did some people say that they did not believe that they just took and lost. The beauty, who knew that it was impossible to worry about her opponents, thought that Xiaomo was actually an amazing guy. Our hero stood for a while and looked attentively at his opponent, but did not say anything more to him. Abruptly, he felt a hand touch his shoulder, so he immediately turned around. There was a girl standing behind the young man who didn't dare to say anything. That was why Xiaomo guessed that it was most likely that she was going to stand up for her captain. But the beauty, bringing some notebook, asked our hero for an autograph, although she did it with great embarrassment. The student was not used to doing such things, and therefore he was embarrassed himself, although he could not refuse. But before the young man could put his signature in one notebook, another girl immediately ran up and said that she also wanted to get an autograph. In the next second, the Krasavitses were already arguing among themselves, discussing who came first and who was second. Unexpectedly, another female student came over and told Xiaomo not to pay attention to these female students, especially since she also had paper and pen. But this time too, it didn't work out with an autograph, because other beauties, noticing that they had a competitor, immediately ran up to her. The guy understood that women's showdown is a very complicated matter, and therefore he knew that it was better not to interfere in them. Moreover, turning around, the young man noticed the captain of the Teikoku University cheerleading team, and therefore decided to say hello to him. The student carefully looked at the young man, but did not hurry to answer him anything. But there was no need to do this, because in the next second, the girls decided to personally meet Xiaomo, and therefore immediately rushed to him. He didn't know what was wrong with them, but he did know that he needed to get out of this place as quickly as possible. Watching what was happening, our hero's comrades said that no one could resist the charm of the boss. At this time, an interesting conversation was held at the Imperial University Department of Philology. So, A third-level literary scholar, Professor Chen He, wanted to know what Xiao Zhao would tell him. The young man happily greeted the teacher, adding that he was glad to see him. The guy said that not so long ago he was a member of the commission for the entrance exams. There, he came across one essay that was rated at the highest score. The staff liked it so much that he decided to scan it. Chen He was amazed, saying that his work was so perfect that it won over even the strict Li. Taking the job, the man noted that he would like to get acquainted with it personally, because there is always a desire to read something new and entertaining. He immediately added that it was very interesting what was so special about him that even old geezer Li, who always skimped on a high score, gave up. Speaking to Mr. Zhao, a young man asked if it was true that Mr. Chen had taken his job after all. He noted that this is actually true. Moreover, after that the literary critic did not appear again, and therefore it will be necessary to make another copy. The stranger immediately asked Xiao Zhao what exactly attracted him to this job, what was unusual about it. The young man immediately explained that it was hard to believe that such an essay was written by a high school student, as if it was getting better and better with each phrase. In the next instant, the professor shouted so loudly that he almost deafened the young people who were sitting nearby with him. The man said that this is just great, simple, and uncomplicated at first glance. The work is actually fraught with many mysteries. Xiao Zhao immediately asked, so it wasn't for nothing that Li Lao rated this essay so highly. The literary critic asked whether the employee really thinks that this student wrote one essay and that's all. And he explained that he personally believes that the level of his training is sufficient for admission to the Faculty of Philology. Then he added that he definitely wants to talk to the Writers' Association. They can't let the talent of such a gifted guy go to waste in some university. Thinking about it, Xiao Zhao said that at this rate, Xiao Mo would have to change departments again. The young man with glasses did not understand his colleague, and therefore said what is meant by the word again. The employee, thinking about it, noted that quite recently this young man still transferred from a foreign language to the Faculty of Physics and Mathematics. Even though it was early in the morning, students were already walking on the street outside the university. Holding the phone in her hands, the young girl was reading something carefully there. Standing on the street, she read the answer in the chat. It was clear that there was no limit to her joy. At the same time, our hero, who has not even woken up yet, carefully looked at the time on the clock, realizing that it was still early. The young man did not understand who was writing to him, but he decided to read it anyway, because a lot of different things had happened recently. In the next second, our hero's eyes widened in surprise. He shouted aloud that this simply could not be. The reason was that the guy did not receive more than one message, which surprised him. There were over 9,700 of them. At this time, his invisible assistant appeared in front of Xiao Mo, who shouted that the young man had reached the 20 million fan mark and immediately added that the hidden task of a famous person is considered completed. And after a moment, the blonde said that she was glad to see the owner, with whom they had not communicated for a long time. She did not expect that he would be able to complete the next intermediate task so easily, and therefore believes that she underestimated him in vain. The surprised guy asked that he had no idea who his fans were or what they had to do with the missions. For a moment, the young man thought, realizing that there were also some missions. Their success depends on their level of popularity, and he immediately added that the web system never ceases to amaze him. But the assistant sharply shouted that communication skills also need to be learned. Like everything else, this experience is undoubtedly important in the life of every person. The student didn't want to argue with her, but immediately said in a gentle voice that he was wondering what kind of reward he would get for successfully completing the mission. The young man believed that the assistant appeared not just like that, but precisely for this purpose, and therefore hoped for something very good. However, the disgruntled blonde suddenly declared that since Xiaomo believed that the task did not have a training function, and immediately fell silent. Then she abruptly stated that she was leaving the young man alone to sort things out on his own. The guy didn't want the girl to leave, so he asked in a soft tone if she really dared to take offense at him. The young man was a little upset himself because he knew that he didn't get his reward. Pressing various buttons, Xiaomo came to the conclusion that since the blonde was already acting like this, he could handle it without her help. On one of the placards, it was written that the famous person was completed, and the second phase was in progress. He didn't understand all that it meant, but he knew he couldn't stop. Therefore, he decided that he would carefully read everything that was written. Then he would understand exactly what was going on. The young man managed to find out that the number of fans plays an important role in this task. However, he still couldn't believe that all of this was actually affecting the completion of the quest. What interested the young man the most was the King of Intellect wrestling, although he didn't know what it all meant yet. It turned out that the Battle of Intellects is an international competition in which the best minds from more than 10 countries take part. China, the land of lighthouses, the land of cherry blossoms, the land of eagles, and the land of witches are competing for the first place in various fields of knowledge. Finally, the total points scored by each of the countries were calculated, and the contestant from the country of lighthouses became the winner, beating his rivals by several steps. China, on the other hand, did not approach the selection of candidates so responsibly, but it was only a few points behind. Such competitions do not show the true potential of an entire country, but the public does not think so, because the country of lighthouses, which took first place, ridiculed China. All this caused the residents of the country to get very angry about it. Sitting in the cafe, the conversation was about how the lighthouse country was only too happy to fan the flames out of anger. But this time, China was demanding revenge. Enron said that this is what they call the battle of the intellect, and therefore the country has high hopes for Xiaomo. Everyone thinks that the guy will be able to put the country of lighthouses in its place. The student said out loud that he thought it was just another stupid show that he didn't like so much. Inwardly, he thought that if he had known that Xiaoxi had morning classes, he definitely wouldn't have come. So, while sipping his juice, he told the student to forget about it. Because it's not worth any worries, he still won't take part in it. But the girl did not believe that such a thing was even possible. So she carefully watched the teenager. Pushing her phone over to Tom, she told him that it would be a good idea if he watched one of the videos first. But our hero, who was full of confidence, said that he didn't care what was in there because it wouldn't change his mind. In the video, a man said that this time they have only one goal, and it is to keep the title of the winner. The announcer said that there is a rumor that there is a guy in China who is very brilliant, just the kind of person who can compete with the country of lighthouses. But the stranger said that if we are talking about a student who received an invitation from the physics and mathematics and philology departments at the same time, then these are trifles. The young man is only 18 years old, and therefore there are big doubts that he will actually be able to show something brilliant. The girl again said that she had information that Xiaomo had managed to embarrass a mathematician from the Sakura state. But the man again said that these are the usual tricks of Asians which are best not to be led. And, getting up from his seat, he shouted that these people are simply mired in vanity, and therefore for them, this is the norm. The audience supported this man, and therefore loudly applauded him. The man said that on their part, real students will participate in the battle of intelligence. China, on the other hand, expels those who have already graduated from universities. They say that the most developed countries are famous for the best minds. However, it didn't matter, because they would still be able to beat them all with ease. He could even bet that their vaunted genius would never appear on the show. And while the person says that the reason is because Xiaomo is a regular nobody, there was very loud applause in the audience. As for our hero, he watched this video very carefully, realizing that his emotions are very contradictory. Enron wasn't going to stop, so she immediately told the student to look at the comments again. The young man did not understand why he was doing all this, but he could not stop. The young man knew that he had time, so he read what people wrote and did not rush anywhere. In the next minute, the system sent a notification that our hero is waiting for the second part of the task about a famous person. At that moment, the guy understood what was required of him, and therefore thought to himself that he simply could not stay away, especially since this is his task. And out loud, Xiaomo proudly stated that since things had turned out this way, then he would take part in the battle of intellects. Moving down the street, the girls discussed the latest news that our hero will fight for the title of king in the battle of intelligence. The beauty noted that she has heard, but more than that, she knows for sure that this is the youngest mathematical genius in the last few decades. Another student stated that she hoped that this magnificent student would beat these arrogant upstarts to smithereens. Xiaomo heard all this because he and Xiaoxi were walking right behind these students. The girl immediately noted with humor that she sees that her young man is becoming more and more popular every day. He explained, as usual, with modesty in his voice, that in fact it was all just a trifle, although the student did not like this explanation, and therefore she said that the young man will take part in an international competition. Despite this, he did not even tell her about it. She found out about everything herself. The guy, realizing that he made a big mistake, immediately looked at the beauty in surprise, realizing that he had to somehow justify himself to her. But in the next minute, Xiaoxi laughed, noting that she was just joking. And then she explained that now the young man has not only fans, but also those who scold him behind his back, and also say all sorts of nasty things. After that, I showed the student a tablet so that he could read what other people write about him. The beauty wanted Xiaomo to show what he was capable of, and therefore noted that he should not just give everything, but must do everything that depends on him. The young man said that his beloved should not worry, because he will definitely get this king's cup. Otherwise it cannot be. Smiling, the disciple closed her eyes, then proudly stated that she believed in the young man. The guys didn't want to talk too much about this tournament, because there were other topics that they also wanted to discuss. At this time, some preparations were already being made in the office of the development team for the show fight of intelligences. Even though it was late, a stranger was lighting a cigarette, thinking about something important. Leaning back in his chair, the man knew he had to think of something, even though he didn't know what it was. At that moment, a man ran into the office who immediately announced that they had just been rejected by another sponsor. The young man asked if this really happened even after they promised to transfer all the rights to the name of this program to him. The employee did not immediately answer the question. He thought about it, as if he was hiding something or was afraid of something. Slamming his fist on the table, the man said that this is simply outrageous. Nothing like this should happen. And he added that if everything has come to this, then what kind of trusting relationship can we talk about at all? The employee asked what they should do in this case. Because they already spent too much money from the company's budget on television and radio broadcasting, the man continued to complain while the boss just smoked and thought carefully about something. Lost in his memories, the unknown man recalled how, sitting in his office, the unknown man said that he was well aware that the show on the internet had actually gained a lot of popularity, but the percentage of viewers on television wanted to be better. And then he added that in their time, people prefer to watch short programs, and therefore it is best for managers to find more profitable content for broadcasting. The man with glasses said that their country lost last time, and therefore whether they can guarantee victory in the competition this year, they should know what they are investing in, because losses are not necessary at all. Putting out his cigarette, the young man thought that they didn't have much time, but he believed that they would definitely be able to find a new sponsor. In addition, the loss in the battle of intellect led to attacks by detractors from other countries, and this is also not very good. This could lead to the fact that few people would want to join the team this time. The next minute, the employee came closer to the boss and reluctantly began to say that there was another piece of news. The irritated supervisor said that the person should already say what he originally planned to say, because he behaves like a small child. And the same person added that Xiaomo decided to join them in the upcoming competitions. Lighting a cigarette, the man asked if this was the genius of mathematics, which is constantly talked about and also so much written about. And then he added that he does not understand at all what use he will be in this situation, how he can help with sponsors. After that, he said that, let's say he can become one of the participants, moreover, he may be able to break through to the international stage. But will he be able to beat all the participants from other countries and become a champion? So after a moment, he said that he still didn't understand how this guy would help. Of course, everyone knows that this boy has become popular in some circles, but that's all. Their main goal is a significant increase in ratings and not advertising for anyone, although I immediately thought about it. The man said that Xiaomo is quite a famous student, and therefore it may happen that he will be able to become famous on the national stage. The employee, hearing about this, asked how in this case the young man will be able to win international competitions. But the manager firmly stated that they do not need to worry about this now. First of all, they must promote the program to the top and find sponsors, and then think further. Therefore, now is a good time to review the casting process. When they approached their friend, the guys asked the boss if he could tell them how to solve a complex example. However, Wang Fei again sided with our hero, saying that he was distracting the guy from reading with various nonsense. But the young man explained, he just wants a friend to practice explaining tasks to feel confident on the show. But the young man still did not understand why to fill his head with this now, because the casting will take place only the next day. Xiaomo unexpectedly reported that the guys in charge of developing the program called and said that he didn't need to pass the casting, and that he would automatically qualify for the first round. The audience could not believe their ears, and therefore asked again about how this is even possible. Zhang Xiaochuan said that it was actually very cool that the boss would have such an honor. The fat man also said that it seemed that the director was able to appreciate the abilities of a young man who didn't need to be tested further. But in the next instant, the guy turned his attention to his friend, who was sitting on the other side of the room. Walking over to the blonde man, he asked what Zhao Tian was doing so hard that he wasn't even taking part in the conversation. The young man calmly replied that he was looking at the most discussed news on the internet. Then he added that it looked like Xiaomo was the only person who had been excused from casting for some unknown reason. The concerned blonde admitted that he did not like that there were a lot of detractors who wanted to embarrass the teenager. And while Zhao Tian pointed out that he felt like someone was behind it and doing it on purpose, Zhang Xiaochuan threw up his hands and said that he didn't see anything wrong with it. But the young man stood his ground. He said that failure is very bad, because in case of failure, there will be too much criticism. However, Xiaomo did not answer this question. He just asked his friends why they were so worried about him, because instead, they just need to believe in him. After that, he added that he has repeatedly said that in the face of absolute talent, everything is unimportant. 3 days after this conversation, the debate tournament began. It was a qualifying round. The happy host informed everyone that her name was Jiang Cheng and that she would be sharing everything that would happen on this stage today. The girl said that after passing the first auditions, only 100 applicants among tens of thousands of applications were able to pass this round. So today, they are waiting for the final round of the selection of participants, and then asked the team to raise the curtain. And then the spotlights lit up the guys who were on stage and smiling in anticipation of the contest. Zhang Chang could see the reaction of the audience, so she knew that it was necessary to inflame the interest to the limit. The host said that they had prepared 100 sites so that their applicants could compete with each other. The beauty announced that the contestants will respond simultaneously, but only the first 10 people who gave the correct answer will get points. Then the 10 participants with the best results will become real competitors. They will be able to represent a particular country at an international tournament. After a brief pause, Zhang Chang said that she wanted the audience to welcome their candidates who had gathered in this hall. Our hero was standing in one of the first rows. He was absolutely calm because he knew exactly what results he could show. Moreover, there were guys in the audience who constantly supported Xiaomo, saying that he could do a lot. It was important to the young man that his friends were with him, so he waved to them. One of the strangers sitting in front of our hero's friends happily shouted to everyone that Xiaomo had smiled at her. Xiao Tian patted the fat man's shoulder and informed him that it looked like their boss had a great support group. And the host at this time said that, given that all the contestants are in their places, it makes no sense to delay, and therefore you can start the selection. The girl asked everyone gathered with her to start counting down to the start of the contest. Xiaomo carefully stared in front of him, and he could hear the beauty talking about how this tournament could be considered an open tournament. Pointing to the display board that appeared on the screen, Zhang Chang asked everyone to find the one that was different from the other among the photos presented. Our hero's classmates immediately began to worry. They understood that it was necessary to carefully study all the details in order to understand where the other photo was. Suddenly, the fat man turned to his friend and told him that for some reason some people were looking at the screen with their heads tilted. The blonde saw it for himself, so he thought about it for a while. All these people looked a little strange, and the audience fell silent because the participants were given time to think, as well as evaluate the photos and give answers. One young man with glasses behaved as strangely as possible, which attracted the attention of all the others. Wang Fei laughed at this guy, asking his companion what he was doing and why he was acting so strangely. The blonde guy didn't like it. He said that when he heard about this technique, which is called 3D eyes, you can use it to put several pictures on top of each other. At this point, different elements should immediately be highlighted, and therefore study the screen from top to bottom vertically, from left to right horizontally. Most likely, they combine several photos into one large one, and then compare them to find differences faster. It wasn't easy enough, but it was the only way to get results. At this point, Wang Fei said that he understood everything, adding that only 10 people would be able to get the coveted points anyway. Xiaomo was currently looking at the screen intently, not taking his eyes off, and it was hard to read anything from the expression on his face. Realizing this, it finally dawned on Fatty that their boss didn't seem to have any idea how to use this technique, so he was just figuring out the right photo. At this time, behind the scenes, they carefully made sure that everyone got into the frame, as well as looked harmoniously on the screen. One of the employees approached the boss and told him that he had something to say about hot news on the internet. It was written that the top genius of the country can't even pass the selection round. Isn't that good news? The man noted that this is actually interesting. For sure, most will not be able to pass by this. And then he added that in this case, they will use this farce to attract sponsors. The young man said that he had carefully chosen the questions for this round. None of them related to mathematics, so no matter how much of a genius this Xiaomo was, he couldn't possibly be that smart. But in the next moment, he carefully looked at the young man who was on the stage. It seemed that this guy had decided something for himself, so he started tapping something on the screen. At the same time, our hero looked completely calm, as if he knew exactly what to choose. Surprised, Zhang Chang stated that not much time had passed, even though contestant Xiaomo had already chosen his answer. And then she added that she did not understand how it was possible to carefully study and compare 100 photos during such a segment in order to make a decision. The student was not going to think about what others would think of him, so he calmly waited for the others to give their answers in order to find out the correct one. Suddenly, the host screamed that it was simply impossible to believe, but somehow the guy managed to answer correctly. The audience who were sitting in the audience, including Xiaomo's friends, didn't know what he had done, but they understood that the fact remained. Surprised, Zhang Xiaochuan talked about how he didn't even have time to look at every single photo, let alone anything more. The blonde also pointed out that he obviously knew that their boss was a real genius, but it just seems like something out of the ordinary. Xiaomo was thinking at this moment that the reward for the last draw was the power of inspection, and now he understands that its effects are simply amazing. A few minutes later, answering the next question, the girl informed everyone that once again our hero answered correctly. Surprised children did not understand how this student managed to hit the nail on the head for the second time. Once again, some time passed, and once again, a joyful Zhang Chang informed everyone present that their leader had given another correct answer. Looking at the leaderboard, the girl announced that Xiaomo had managed to answer 7 consecutive questions correctly. The guys again said that their boss is not just good, he does just incredible things. But the young man himself was just thinking about the fact that he actually managed to set a good pace. As for the leader of this project, he carefully observed the student, not believing that he was actually so smart. The young man was angry. He knew what others did, that this teenager was a mathematical genius who solved incredibly complex problems. But this was a completely different matter. The chief understood that if this guy wanted to represent his city, he needed to concentrate on continuing to give the right answers. But it's still hard to believe that there is such an all-round genius in the world. At that moment, the employee again approached the team leader and timidly stated that it seemed to him that the situation was out of control again. The man asked the employee, firstly, not to say stupid things, and secondly, not to say them under his arm, because he himself perfectly sees what is happening on the show. But the young man explained that the situation was certainly strange, but he had something else to say. And then, showing the phone, he said that there are very interesting comments on the internet. The manager was furious and therefore did not want to read anything, but still picked up the phone to see what was there. Once again, the employee said that the boss himself wanted him to contact a PR company that could raise the popularity of the show. Then he timidly went on to say that they had made one mistake. Jumping up from his seat, the leader said that he did not understand what all this meant. And then he said that he had asked the assistant to hire professionals to stir up interest in their program, namely to attack Xiao Mo, to do something interesting. The man, after hitting the employee, asked him if it was really a question of anger falling on the program. 12 hours earlier, the assistant was happy that he had found a strong PR company. But there was one detail that the employee could not foresee. He did not even think about it. In a couple of hours, the PR company found other contractors, and as you know, when this happens, you should not expect something good. 5 minutes before the show started, the boss of these contractors shouted that they had to take their anger out on Xiao Mo, and therefore was confident that the employees would do everything right. However, one of the young people said that this young man seems quite smart, and therefore suggested not to do it because such a thing did not make sense. But the man said that he has been working as an anti-fan for 2 years, inciting wars and insulting people, and therefore he does not need to know anything about anything good or bad. And then he said that they should literally tear to shreds the person for whom the order was made. The employees unanimously replied that they understood everything, and therefore they would do what they were told. But then something went wrong, and therefore they began to mock the program, although it seemed that the fans did not care. And again another round began, in which our hero again showed excellent results. The young man was happy to hear the presenter say that the young man manages just something incredible. Friends noted that their boss is mega cool. He is ahead of everyone. The rest are lagging behind, and quite strongly. At this moment, Zhao Tian asked his companions if they thought the second challenger was so familiar. Unexpectedly, the host said that contestant Song Li Xin is currently in second place, and his results are also quite good. The blonde immediately shouted that he knew this person who was also considered a true genius. The fat man didn't know the young man's name, so he asked how his friend knew him. He explained that last year the young man took third place in the debate tournament, and his knowledge is quite comparable to the winner. Wang Fei immediately assumed that if the boss was currently outscoring him by about 50 points, he immediately fell silent. Although after a moment he said that it doesn't matter at all, because their friend is still the smartest in the whole country. He added that compared to Xiao Mo, they were real beginners who didn't really know anything. And at this moment, behind the scenes, there was a quarrel again, which concerned recent comments on the network. The manager told his assistant to contact the PR company immediately, so that it would delete all unnecessary comments. The employee understood that in this case it was better not to say anything, and therefore immediately ran to carry out the assignment. Sitting on the couch, the man told himself that they had made a big mistake. The entire budget was spent on renting a room and signing a contract with a PR company. Therefore, we can assume that this defeat will end his career path. The manager remembered how he first came to television, how he wanted to achieve a lot, but now it's all in the past. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted because the assistant came running into the room again, turning to the boss. The man was annoyed. He didn't want to see this man, but still asked what he wanted. He thought to himself that he wasn't even allowed to sit in silence for 10 minutes to get lost in his own memories. At that moment, the young man informed the boss that an unknown person was currently on the line, who wanted to become their sponsor. The man immediately jumped up from his chair and asked the subordinate what he had just said. With a smile on his face, the assistant explained once again that the person who planned to become their sponsor had just called. The manager didn't fully believe his own luck, but decided that this might be the turning point he was thinking about. At this point, the employee explained that this unknown person had put forward one key condition, which is that Xiao Mo must become the face of the program. Smiling, the boss said that it was not a problem, they would agree to any conditions. After a while, Zhang Chang informed everyone present that the tournament had come to an end at this point, so they could all congratulate Xiao Mo's contestant. The young man did not just answer the questions, he gave 20 correct answers in a row, which is a record. Therefore, it is already clear to everyone that it was this young man who took the honorable first place in the qualifying competition. The fans were happy because they always believed in this man, who once again showed that he could not let them down. The host understood that she could not just finish the program, so she said that there was a person who also scored a high score, namely 137 points. This is Song Lee Shin, who is also quite an intelligent person. The guy didn't think to stay to receive any congratulations. Instead, he just wandered down the street. The participant was angry because he was confident in his own abilities, and therefore decided that someone had dictated the answers to our hero in advance. The next day, while sitting in the classroom, Wang Fei was joined by a student who asked if it was true that he shared a room with Xiaomo. And then he added that this is the teenager who won the qualifying round of the debate tournament. Finally, the classmate nodded his head, saying that, of course, he knew this person. After all, he managed to take the first place. However, at that moment, another student joined the conversation. He informed the audience that there were rumors that the answers were leaked to the network in advance. After that, the conflict began. The guys did not understand how this could be. Information about it, if it were true, would have leaked out in advance and not just now. But the student did not let up. He did not understand how they were different from Xiaomo. They all just entered the university, study, try. But they are unlikely to ever be able to catch up with this genius. Xiaoxi, who had heard her boyfriend being praised, was smiling, pleased that he was so smart and now popular. But the girl didn't have time to get lost in her own thoughts, because at that moment, Xu Hongchai sat down next to her, who immediately greeted her. The beauty who was friendly to everyone immediately greeted back. However, our hero's friends, who were sitting nearby, immediately looked carefully at the main braggart of the group. Zhang Xiaochuan came up behind him and said that the seat with Xiaoxi was already taken, so it was better for the guy to get up and leave. The young man was not going to do this, and therefore asked if the name of a classmate who was trying to enter into a conflict was really written on it. But he wasn't going to deal with it. He just clenched his fist, and then once again addressed the guy. Suddenly, the young man felt a hand on his shoulder, and Xiaomo happily greeted everyone who was standing next to him. This event caused surprise. Classmates knew that this teenager is very talented, and therefore did not understand why he still needs to attend classes. At this time, the young man asked Xiaoxi if she was okay. Smiling, the beauty said that everything was in order, and therefore invited the young man to sit together. But from behind, surprised, Xu Hongchai wanted to add something, but decided that in this situation it was probably unnecessary. Our hero also did not plan to quarrel, and therefore he just smiled. The other guys also thought that the braggart, as usual, behaved badly, and therefore began to laugh at him. He saw what was happening and was angry that the whole team was on Xiaomo's side again. But I didn't have to be angry for long because the next minute the teacher came into the classroom. She informed everyone that class was starting, so she asked everyone to keep quiet. The girl explained that she would be teaching a foreign language module for the students. After that, she expressed the hope that everyone present probably understands what a difficult profession they have. Xiaomo, like everyone else, was listening intently to the lecturer, but his mind was completely elsewhere. Although a minute later the young man gave his friend a note in which he asked her what it was. At this time, the teacher again repeated that they have a difficult profession, which she would like to convey to students, and then she added that at first glance it may seem that the specialty of mathematicians and physicists is much more complicated. Xiaoxi smiled, then also handed over a note saying that everything was actually fine. And the lecturer still explained that languages require deep knowledge, because without it, it will be impossible to express yourself. Moreover, after graduation, students will have many opportunities. Each of them will have a chance to find themselves. Students will be able to get jobs as interpreters and translators, and if someone wants to, they can even become diplomats. The teacher was watching the audience closely, but there seemed to be something that was really confusing her. The girl did not make a comment to anyone. Instead, she said that first she wanted the guys to translate part of the text in Chinese. The teacher took chalk out of the box and started writing something on the blackboard. In the next moment, the teacher looked around the class again, as if she was thinking about who she could call to the blackboard to complete the task. Xu Hongkai was the first to volunteer for the board, holding out his hand above everyone else, saying that he had something to show. As he walked down the aisle, he thought that Xiaomo wasn't really a genius. While performing the work, the student was sure that his main competitor in foreign languages probably did not understand anything. After a while, the teacher accepted the job and she said that it was quite a good translation. The student was pleased to hear the praise, especially in front of Xiaomo, so he smiled like never before. Although a minute later, Cholin said that the aesthetic side could be worked out a little, adding that this is why the students are here, because this is what she will teach them for the next 4 years. The young man was sure that he would be able not only to make a good translation, but also to perform it according to all the rules, but this was not possible. After that, the teacher said, "Why don't Xiaomo also try translating this passage? Especially since one student has already done so." The young man did not think that he would be called, so he told himself that he would have to make a transfer. The ill-wisher, seeing how the guy goes to the blackboard, gloated to himself, thinking that this boy also needs to taste the teacher's anger. Scratching his head, the young man apologetically asked the teacher if she could repeat what language they should translate this text into, because he was sitting far away and couldn't hear it. The teenager smiled, hoping that now he will be repeated once again the task with which he has to cope. The group's braggart didn't understand who Xiaomo was playing at, thinking that the guy was provoking the teacher in the first lesson. The teacher looked at the student in amazement, but she was in no hurry to say anything to him. Although her face turned stern after a moment, she remained silent, as if she hadn't heard the question. Xiaomo didn't understand anything as time dragged on, but no one repeated the task to him. As she handed the chalk to the student, the girl was angry, saying that first the student should go to the blackboard, and then he can make a translation in as many languages as he can speak. The young man knew that this would actually be an interesting task, because he had something to show. Therefore, in a moment, our hero was holding chalk in his hands and was going to complete the task. But before starting, the student carefully read the text that he was asked to translate. The ill-wisher started gloating again, thinking that this was the end of the young man's fame, because he was about to be exposed. Suddenly, Xiaomo turned to the teacher and said that he didn't have enough space to write everything he needed. The girl was angry, and therefore said that in this case the teenager can write as much as will fit on this board. The entire class was looking at the classmate carefully. Zhang Xiaochuan told his classmate that the teacher looked like he was about to break down and scream. The guys who didn't like our hero immediately started filming his work, saying that this is a historic moment. Xu Hongkai was sure that the young man was actually going to fail, after which everyone would laugh at him. But after a minute, something changed, because the student's eyes widened in surprise. The reason was that the student filled up almost the entire blackboard. Despite this, he continued to write where there was still space. My classmates couldn't believe their eyes. They realized that the text was translated into about 20 languages, which was something impossible. Suddenly, one of the guys asked Zhang Xiaochuan if he had seen Xiaomo using the phone, thinking that he had spied on the answers. The teacher thought to herself that she had written this passage herself. As for the guy, not only does it have a complex logical structure, but it also has an unusual content. But she didn't fully understand whether this young man had actually translated into 20 languages so easily, even though she only knew 5 languages herself. It was something amazing that even a senior wouldn't be able to handle, let alone a freshman. The teacher thought that just one look at these translations is enough to understand that they are of first-class quality. This is the level of a professional translator with 20 years of experience, although no, even better. It turns out that this young man is actually a real genius. Moreover, it can be said that he has a perfect command of all these languages. Approaching the teacher, our hero humorously noted that he wanted to write something else, but there was no room. The teacher knew that she couldn't check even half of this work, so she said that it was possible to finish it. The girl did not want to say anything more, and therefore informed everyone present that this lesson was over, and therefore everyone should be free. She thought to herself that an 18-year-old student could speak so much English fluently that it was almost impossible to comprehend. After that, she decided that she needed to talk to the dean about it. While our hero was walking to his seat, another student was telling someone if he had posted this video yet. As he sat down on the chair, he told Xiaoxi if she had seen how good he was, realizing that it was actually something. The beauty said that the young man really does incredible things, but after a moment she asked in a worried tone how it was that he suddenly began to stand out so much from the others. The young man didn't know what to say, so he just smiled, wondering if that was the case. To himself, our hero thought that all this is possible thanks to the educational system, which he cannot tell anyone about. 8 hours earlier, Xiaomo had been lying in his room chatting with an assistant. She said that the teenager's performance at the rematch helped him advance in fulfilling his mission. The guy immediately asked the blonde to turn on the panel, because he wanted to personally look at it to be happy for himself. In the next minute, the same panel appeared, on which all the merits of our hero were indicated. But suddenly, the young man told Fan that he didn't see any drastic changes, only that there were a lot more points. The young man was also surprised that there was an indicator that was always at 0. Moreover, he did not understand how it could be raised. At this point, the girl explained that Fan's points were equal to achievement points, since the player hadn't reached a certain level yet. The point system was blocked. When Xiaomo heard about this, he was surprised, because he already had 13 million subscribers at this stage, so he was sure that this would definitely be enough. After that, he asked how many subscribers there should be in this case in order for the point system to finally open. Fan explained that everything is very simple. Just 20 million rubles is enough. With a sigh of relief, the young man decided that this was not so much, he could handle it. Although after a moment he added that he did not understand where else he could get such a large number of fans, already all those who wanted to subscribe to him, And then he decided that maybe he needed to achieve a higher status. At this moment, a knock came at the man's office. Even though he was busy, still said that a guest could come through. Raising his head, the unknown man saw our hero in front of him and greeted him joyfully. Turning to the director, the guy said that if he didn't mind, he would like to take a sick leave, which he really needed. The man, getting up from his seat, immediately said that most likely the reason is that the young man is going to take part in the tournament, and then asked how long it will not be. The young man noted that the team reported that 2 weeks would be enough. The director explained that this show has recently become very significant, and therefore the student should try hard. The most important thing is not to embarrass their university. Xiaomo said out loud that there was no need to worry about him, but inwardly thought that since he was participating in the tournament, he would definitely win. Otherwise, what was it all for? At this time, the director of the TV station was also preparing, because the tournament was going to be held soon. While reading Song Li Xin's file, the man thought that this guy is also very smart. His file is great. Many people consider this person to be a real genius. The assistant noted that this person is more interested in promoting on social networks. In the last tournament, this person took the 3rd place, but he was just unlucky. In terms of strength and knowledge, he can easily compare with the winner because his knowledge actually causes delight. The employee admitted that initially he wanted this particular person to lead the team in an international tournament. The director said so, but as a result, the young man still chose Xiaomo for some reason. And then he added that this time the employee actually did a great job and therefore deserves praise. For a while, the employee looked at his boss carefully, although he was in no hurry to leave or say anything. And he thought to himself that he hadn't really planned anything. And again, the director noted, he noticed that recently the internet has been very restless. There are a lot of different conversations. The young man noted that this is actually true. People now send spam to everyone in a row, which is very unpleasant. And then people split into 2 teams, some saying that no one would understand that Xiaomo was the youngest polymath. And they added that ordinary mortals would not be able to understand the exclusivity of this young man. But others were sure that most people didn't understand what science meant, and that it was difficult to improve their mental abilities by 1 point in the late stages and 10 points in the early stages. So Xiaomo might be a genius, but he couldn't surpass the level of great scientists. And again, the opponents shouted that others were just jealous of this guy, and therefore they were saying all sorts of nasty things about him. Those who were against our hero called his fans ordinary fanatics. Sometimes the quarrels were so terrible that it seemed that the rivals were actually ready to kill each other for their heroes. The director, knowing the situation, told the subordinate to closely monitor all this and always be aware of the situation. And with his hand on the table, he went on to say that no matter how special their show was, it was still entertaining. Therefore, you need to make sure that the opinion of viewers will necessarily be in their favor. If the assistant does a good job, then he will have a great future. The young man was very happy about this, and therefore said that the director should not worry because he would give his best. Leaving the office, the guy thought to himself that he could not have dreamed that he would be so lucky until recently. The director himself knew that this was his chance, exactly the one he had been waiting for. With everything settled, making Xiaomo a key part of their program would be the right thing to do. After a while, having gathered everyone, the director announced that since everything is in place, then they can start their meeting. One of the employees complained that if something happened, the boss could just send a notification by email and not collect them in this place. Our hero did not understand what the others were so dissatisfied with, and therefore carefully watched what was happening. But the man wasn't going to answer the questions. He just stated that for the sake of the popularity of their show, they decided that each participant would choose an individual test, while replays are prohibited. One of the guys immediately said that they were just being bullied, because it wasn't fair. But the director continued to point out that they will invite Mr. Chan from the University of Science and Technology. He will judge the participants and give a truthful assessment. One of the girls looked at the manager carefully because she knew the man. Another student of Tajgia Gavoril that this is a neuro researcher. This is the most famous Professor Chan. The man confirmed that this is really him. Everyone knows that he is the most authoritative person who will appreciate the complexity of all projects. Therefore, any participant can choose the difficulty level from 1 to 10. As a result, you will get the most objective assessment that everyone will be happy with. The man went on to explain that he hoped that the guys would do their best. After all, the task under the 7th level of difficulty is beyond the power of even the average genius to perform perfectly. Realizing that someone might have questions, the manager immediately asked them to ask them without any hesitation. Scratching his head, one of the students pointed out that if Professor Chan was already there, then there wouldn't be any problems. Although after a moment he thought about it, deciding to say something else and immediately added that it turns out that the last person may be at a disadvantage. Again, the audience looked at each other, realizing that such a possibility actually exists. The manager said that today he gathered everyone to discuss this issue. The man explained that in the end they want to choose the best project. Everyone will probably agree with this, and therefore he will act as an intermediary and immediately offer options. Xiaomo immediately raised his hand and said that he had come last, so he would have to choose from the remaining options. One of the students carefully looked at the young man, not believing that he agreed to such conditions. After another minute, Song Li-shin stood up from his seat and asked to be given a choice. Seeing the young man reach for the card, the director asked him to take his time. The reason was that the main character of the program was Xiaomo. The money was given to him, and now this person is going to draw the card last. At this moment, the participant asked the audience if anyone would mind if he took the card that he had already chosen for himself. The guys saw that it was a difficulty level of more than 9, so they opened their eyes wide in surprise. The director also asked if Song Li-shin was sure that this was the option he was planning to pursue. The young man said that it seems that the choice of question depends on the participant. Then he added that it was best to hurry up and get this over with. Everyone thought that this is a very difficult question. Will the guy really stop at it? Because you can easily make a mistake. And the cup is at stake, although they understood that the opponent is very strong, and therefore he can cope. Not much time had passed, and the other participants were already reaching for their cards as well. Suddenly, Song Li-shin addressed our hero as the winner of the selection round, saying that it was his turn to choose. He closed his eyes and thought that the man was targeting him, even though he didn't know what the reason was. After a moment, Xiaomo reached for the card and took out the question that was at the highest difficulty level, the 10th one. The participant carefully watched what was happening and did not believe that this could even happen. After all, the problem was that the subject examines 500 glasses of water, assigns a spectator and chooses one of the glasses, then he turns away and closes his eyes while the spectator changes the glasses in random order. Song Li-shin did not understand how to find the right glass after that, and then asked our hero if he was ready for such a thing. After hearing that this is the essence of the choice, the young man was annoyed that someone was so confident in themselves, as well as in their own knowledge. But I wasn't going to show it, so I just said that in this case, it would be interesting to see how this performance would turn out. And then he added that he hopes that this show is fair, and there are no fake players in it. The audience looked after this player and said that there are such ill-mannered as well as arrogant people, although only one young man thought that it would only get worse, because this is a competition and there is nothing to be done about it. Only Xiaomo said that he didn't understand what was going on with all these people, why they didn't like his question, why they even cared about this topic. At this moment, the director declared that the holder of the title was the youngest genius, second only to Song Li-shin. Then he said that he was only 2 months younger than the guy from our hero's university, Lu Zhiyao. But the interesting thing is, who would have thought that a weirdo like Xiaomo would enter Anna University? There are a lot of Imperial University students among the participants. No wonder they don't like the guy. This is a competition between universities. Everyone wants to be better, but the young man still did not understand. Okay, students, but for what reason even scientists treat each other unkindly because they are from the same field? There was no response. Instead, a lot of untruthful information about our hero appeared on the network again. Many people couldn't wait to see the young man. Others didn't know what to expect at all. But everyone knew that everything would be decided by the talent show. After a while, a happy Zhang Chan announced that the calendar was on November 1st, and therefore the second stage of their tournament was starting. The girls said that this time they were honored to welcome Professor Chan, who will evaluate the participants' performance. This man is the youngest expert in the field of neuroresearch, and his work has been recognized by the scientific community not only at home, but also around the world. The man himself said that science is the only criterion by which he will judge the answers. Behind the scenes, the image of this person was taken in close-up, because his opinion was actually considered. The manager didn't just watch it all. He sat as close to the monitor as possible, as if something important depended on it. Suddenly, the employee called out to his boss because he wanted to ask him something. He, in turn, turned around and said that the young man should not worry because everything is fine. Inwardly, the man thought that his future and career depended entirely on the ordinary student that Xiaomo was. Therefore, the supervisor believed that somehow the student would be able to do something incredible and show himself. That is why the young man's memories were transported back to some time ago. When he told our hero that they needed to choose a spectator for the test, the guy did not understand why the main person was looking for a certain person. At the same time, it was difficult to understand why he needed to look for someone. But the man explained that they need a trusted person, because the student is not going to do this task alone. The manager was horrified to see the teenager smile and sigh as if he didn't need it at all. Getting up from his seat, the young man shouted loudly, "Seriously, the guy won't do this." Xiaomo loudly said that if the company was going to fake the competition, he would just turn around and leave, because he would never participate in such a thing. The boss knew that there was no point in trying to persuade this student, so all he thought about was that he really did everything without letting himself or him down. At this time, the audience in the hall was jubilant. They were waiting for their favorites to show themselves. A young man was already standing on the stage, and the professor was saying that the participant's performance was worthy of 9 points. But given the difficulty, he could only give 54 points. The host immediately explained that, unfortunately, this result is not enough to enter the top 5. But the participants are still worthy of praise for their wonderful performances. And after a moment, she announced that the next applicant, Song Li Xin, had participated in the tournament more than once, but this time she wanted to show her best side, so she chose the task of recognizing faces with a difficulty level of almost 10. The girl asked Professor Chan what is involved in facial recognition, whether it is true that we are talking exclusively about the eyes. The man explained that intelligence affects not only memory and the ability to calculate, but also image processing skills and much more. Some people are able to recognize spatial distances faster than others, while others can quickly recognize the pitch of sounds. But all these are different types of mental abilities that everyone still has. After a while, the surprised host announced to everyone that Song Li Xin was able to do the impossible. He found the right face. The professor immediately noted that, given the complexity, the performance of this contestant can be called just perfect, plus not enough time was spent. And therefore he gives this participant a well-deserved 10 points. Zhang Chang was genuinely happy for the man because he actually did his best. The girl said that taking into account the previous competition, the young man now has the highest score, which is 95 points. She asked that everyone in the audience applaud Sun Li Xin for his outstanding abilities. A minute later, the host announced that their next challenger was the winner of the selection round, Xiao Mo. But a minute later, the surprised girl literally shouted that this young man had chosen the 10th level of difficulty. Again, the professor pointed out that before they started, he wanted to say that he was surprised to learn that someone had chosen this test. This question was intended as a template for other tasks to determine their difficulty, so he didn't even think anyone would choose it. That was why Mr. Chan was very much looking forward to the performance of this unique contestant. Our hero immediately appeared in the aisle. His fans began to shout and applaud, which the guy was pleased to hear. Zhang Chang said that this is a 2-stage competition, so first they need to choose a spectator. After that, this person will help you complete the task, and therefore you need someone attentive and responsible. Dozens of hands immediately appeared in the hall, and therefore the girl chose the young man who came across, asking him to immediately go up on stage. The young man who was chosen was glad that he had such a unique opportunity, at least indirectly, to participate in the tournament. The girl at this moment explained that the question of the 10th level of difficulty, this is just the limit of human intelligence, so it was interesting to see if this participant could handle something like this or not. At this time, interesting events were taking place in the second studio, where there was also a monitor. One of the young men asked Song Li Xin if it was true that he had suggested an audience member, and when he didn't get an answer, he went on to say that the guy probably wanted to put on a show starring Xiao Mo. But the guy replied that he didn't care, he just didn't want anyone to rig the results. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. The young man explained that he had checked the props backstage and was also fine. The participant thought to himself that even if our hero has some advantages, you can only see the difference in these glasses by resorting to cheating. If the viewer is not a figurehead, this guy will only be a shame, because he will not be able to find the right container. Having heard about this, a friend said that this is actually true. You will not pass this test honestly. Although what is the point of cheating in the world of science because the real test requires strength? Song Li Xin said that Xiao Mo is just an ordinary fool. Moreover, it is not clear how he managed to get into such a prestigious university. Even the mathematics department is afraid to choose. And therefore, what kind of power we are talking about. At this moment, the spectator who was already standing on the stage was carefully looking at all the glasses of water. The young man noted to himself that there were no markings on these containers at all, which even scared him. And after a minute, the guy decided on his choice, and therefore pointed to the container that he liked best. The presenter noted that once the choice is made, then the participant is obliged to study this glass, and immediately invited the young man to do it closer. The audience carefully watched the young man who was studying the glass, although they understood that this was some kind of real madness. The guys in the hall conferred among themselves about whether the student would be able to find a glass afterward or not, realizing that this was almost impossible. Zhang Chang immediately asked our hero if he had already learned everything. Then it was time to move on to the next part, and the participant immediately agreed. And then Xiao Mo was given a black, thick blindfold, which he put on his eyes. Moreover, the teenager also turned away from the glasses so that everyone could be sure that he was not peeping. At this time, one of the employees hid a glass between other similar ones so that the student could not distinguish his glass from other similar ones. To make it easier for the audience to wait, the host asked the professor what he thought Xiao Mo's chances of success were. The man said that he would not risk guessing the probability of success, because luck is a special thing. But one thing he can say for sure, this test has reached the limit of human abilities. The young man listened carefully to the lecturer who was supposed to evaluate him, but even more carefully he studied the glasses. Meanwhile, Chang continued to talk about how he thought there was a 1% chance. Just at that moment, the guy stopped carefully by one of the glasses and looked at the water for a long time, as if he saw something in it. The girl didn't pay much attention to the guy, so she asked the professor if he really had such a bad opinion of Xiaomo. But the scientist again said that he always adheres only to the scientific criterion. Our hero suddenly pointed to the glass that he had been studying for a long time. So Jiang Chang asked if the young man really chose this container. The young man turned around and carefully looked somewhere. His gaze was somehow confused. The guy immediately scratched his head and the girl continued to ask about what was bothering the contestant. The host did not understand anything. She was confused. In the hall too, everyone rose from their seats. There was complete silence. Jiang Chang nervously talked about how it had only been a few minutes. Was the young man really going to make the final choice? The young man had already made up his mind long ago, so he smiled and said what he had said earlier, that he had already made his choice. In the next minute, Jiang Chang said that it was hard to believe, but the contestant gave the correct answer. Xiaomo immediately raised his hand, realizing that he had managed to complete this task as well. Given that the TV sets were placed everywhere, everyone on the other side of the screen could also see everything clearly. Song Li Xin stood up from his chair and nervously asked how this was even possible. The surprised young man said that this guy probably cheated because it was already discussed earlier, that it is impossible to cope with such a task just like that. Although he immediately added, maybe the fact is that there was some special glass, for example. The bottom is too thin or thick compared to others. Song Li Xin angrily shouted that there was no such thing, because he had seen these glasses himself and also checked them carefully. Even using the defocusing technique, it was impossible to distinguish them. So it was even more baffling how the young man had managed to give the correct answer after all. The host at the time said that she was convinced that it was impossible for viewers to believe what had just happened. Answering the girl's question about how the young man managed to do this, he said that he didn't really know what to say. He just sees the difference. The beauty only laughed because she didn't know what else to ask this teenager. He still wouldn't tell her his secret for sure. That's why I immediately turned to Professor Chang, saying that just a few minutes ago, Professor Chang had a different opinion about Xiaomo's participant. But he had completed the test perfectly, so I want to know if there is a scientific explanation for this. The man, like everyone else, was very discouraged, and therefore tried to find a suitable answer. Although he immediately corrected himself and explained that this guy has an exceptional skill for color vision, Jiang Chang looked at this scholar in surprise, because she didn't understand what this could mean. The professor did not hesitate and said that everyone knows that mammals are not able to distinguish between yellow and abstract colors. In their eyes, tigers, as well as plants of the same color, and this is normal for them. The eye of an ordinary person can recognize 3 colors. The crow, for example, we see exclusively in black. But it seems to birds that the raven is multicolored, and therefore people, like mammals, are not able to distinguish certain colors. Only those who have 4-color vision can see shades that are inaccessible to the eye of an ordinary person. Scientific research has long proven that water reflects ultraviolet rays. If a person's vision can see these rays, the water will have a special color. The host immediately remarked, it turns out that the talented Xiaomo relies on 4-color vision and can see things that are hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. The joyful scientist shouted that this is not all, because the water is constantly in motion. After the order of the glasses was changed, the surface of the water also changed. To complete this test, you need not only exceptional eyesight, but also high skills of graphic reflection. This is the only way to find the similarity of water patterns that have changed. So the young man was able to find the right glass. Mr. Chang honestly admitted that he could not even imagine that this task could be completed perfectly. Therefore, it is definitely worthy of the title of the winner of the tournament. Xiaomo actually deserves to be called the King of Intelligence. At this time, the tournament was also held abroad, where the host congratulated William on the first place in the national selection. Sitting in a chair, the participant said that it was not difficult at all. A friend of the young man once cautiously said that he had heard rumors that a very strong rival had appeared in China. It seems that he got the highest score for microscopic identification of water, and therefore now is almost a hero. William didn't know what his companion was getting at, so he asked him haughtily what he wanted. The young man explained that after conducting an analysis, they came to the conclusion that this task could not be completed. And then he added that no one would believe that they gave the highest score for such a thing, because it is impossible to study water so thoroughly. William immediately began insulting the representatives of China, saying that they cannot get rid of the inferiority complex. They always put forward some false statements. After that, he said that since they decided to take such a step, they will soon be contacted by the Chinese representatives who made this program. Once again, the comrade couldn't understand what the young man was talking about, or why he was so affected by it. William explained that they had done it to preserve their reputation, and they must have paid a lot of money to make them play along with their performance. In simple words, they paid a bribe to lose to their competitors. There is simply no other explanation. The young man asked if it was true that they would refuse these people because why participate in such a thing? But the guy had other plans for this, and so he asked why to do it. The comrade did not seem to follow the train of thought, and therefore said that in this case you can lose to these Chinese. And what is the point of this? But William called his friend a fool and said that he simply could not play, and therefore should not worry about it at all. After that, he added, "You need to take as much money as possible from these people and then just win this competition." However, the colleague again asked whether the young man was not afraid that he would be discovered and persecuted for such things, but it seems that the winner was incredibly confident, and therefore asked a counter-question, asking if the Chinese would dare to take such a step. If they suddenly try to dig deeper and even use the money, then this will definitely be the beginning of their end. Moreover, if he loses to this dilettante, then the Chinese version of the program will forever cease to exist. And this is another plus of the ingenious plan. The comrade immediately proudly declared that William could be considered a real devil and a genius at the same time. Clutching a lighter, the guy explained that this is the way of the world. Being weak is the worst sin, because weaklings never achieve anything. Only the strongest can survive. Therefore, it is necessary to strive for such people, and this should be followed. After a while, Zhao Mo, who had returned to his normal life, walked back from the university and studied something carefully. Suddenly, the boy felt his hand being squeezed very tightly, which scared the young man. For a while longer, the teenager stared intently at the man in front of him, as if not fully understanding what was going on. It was Liu Feng who immediately dragged the young man somewhere without saying a word to him. The guy stopped and called the beauty by name. He wanted to know what was going on, because no one had ever treated him like that before. However, the beauty just stood there and carefully observed the student, even though she was in no hurry to say anything to him. But in the next instant, the girl timidly asked if Xiao Mo was available, adding that she had a small request to make. The young man looked at his friend in surprise, thinking that there was a weak side in her character that he did not even know about. But the guy with incomprehension in his voice said that he didn't quite understand what Liu Feng wanted from him, so he asked for more details. The girl was confused. It seemed that she did not know where to start this conversation, and therefore gathered her thoughts. Suddenly, the beauty said that this is a personal matter. She needs the help that she has already asked for. Xiao Mo calmly noted that they were not strangers, so the girl could say whatever she wanted without any hesitation. With her head bowed, Liu Feng explained that her parents had insisted that she go on a blind date, then hesitated again. The young man did not understand what his friend was driving at, and she immediately said that she wanted the student to pretend to be her boyfriend. For our hero, this was a real shock, and therefore for some time the teenager did not know what to say in this regard. With embarrassment in his voice, Xiao Mo explained that he already had a girlfriend, and therefore suggested that the beauty should go to someone else because there are probably still quite good acquaintances. But a frustrated Liu Feng noted that she had no friends since childhood, and the young man is the only one with whom she has been so close lately. The girl did not want to give up. She noted that since the young man calls her sister, then he should do her a favor. The teenager honestly said that he really wants to help, but he also has his own things to do. Liu Feng was silent for a moment. She didn't know what other arguments she could make to persuade this person to help her. And then she said that if the guy can't, then it's better to forget about the fact that they know each other. Therefore, she sharply noted that she would break all family ties, after which the beauty again fell silent. Xiao Mo sharply shouted that he didn't want to be intimidated, and then explained that he would come up with something interesting. He scratched his head and went on to say that his sister had not changed at all, although he did not specify what exactly he was talking about. The girl was also not going to discuss her qualities, and therefore sincerely thanked the guy for agreeing to help her. Suddenly, Liu Feng abruptly grabbed the student's arm and pulled him somewhere, shouting that now was the time to set off. Our hero did not understand where he was being pulled, so he asked his friend again. The girl explained that they needed to go shopping, because the young man should look good, after all. Whether he would go to a meeting in sweatpants, the young man couldn't understand anything, but Liu Feng said that she just wanted to buy the disciple good and new clothes that would make him look beautiful and solid. Xiao Mo thought for a moment. It seemed that he was not only confused by this situation, but also by the fact that someone was going to buy him something. And with a dissatisfied look, he said that everything was in perfect order with his clothes, and therefore he did not know why to change anything. Laughing, Liu Feng explained that this outfit is suitable for everyday wear, but for such a special occasion, it is not suitable at all, so you need to buy a formal suit. The young man honestly admitted that the last time he wore a suit was when he was a child, when he went to some kind of holiday, and then he still agreed and added that the girl would still not be impoverished if she made such an acquisition. Not much time had passed, and the young people were already in a large and luxurious restaurant. Xiao Mo wasn't in a hurry to say anything. He just looked around carefully, trying to see everything as best he could. The young man said that this place was actually quite good, then asked that Liu Feng was probably dating a nice guy. With sadness in her voice, the beauty replied that she didn't know what her parents were thinking, but they introduced her to a 30-year-old man. Most likely they thought that she would not be able to find a husband. And she added that it should be a corresponding person, no less talented and interesting. Only in the whole country you will not be able to find such a person. Although she thought to herself that this was the case in the past, and now she knows one such young man. At this moment, the receptionist approached the guys and asked if the young people had booked a table. Xiaomo confidently announced that they had come to meet Wang Kei, who should be waiting for them. The girl asked that the guests follow her, because she wants to lead them to the right table. The young man was calmly drinking his tea, his gaze showing absolutely no emotion. Liu Feng carefully studied this person, however, she was also indifferent. It seemed like he was just an ordinary guy. He, in turn, could not take his eyes off his new acquaintance, although he could not say a word for the first seconds. Suddenly, the young man said hello. He said that it was nice to meet Ms. Liu, although in the next instant Wang Kei turned his gaze to our hero, who was carefully studying the stranger, but the former was in no hurry to start a conversation. Answering the young man's question, the girl explained that next to her is her boyfriend, whose name is Xiaomo. The beauty honestly admitted that she came because she personally wanted to talk to a man. Moreover, it was rude to refuse. Wang Ke was calm. He didn't want to settle things, so he asked the guests to sit down at a table to discuss everything thoroughly. It was strange for the young man to see this. He was sure that this person would be angry, but he was completely calm. Turning to Xiaomo, his friend asked Mr. Wang to bring another chair for himself, but the man was not going to object this time, so he did what was asked of him. Moreover, he was studying our heroes. It seemed that he was thinking something over to himself. Our hero was sure that Mr. Wang didn't think he and Liu Feng were close enough, so he probably understood right away. The man respectfully asked that he didn't know what Xiaomo was doing, wanting to get to know the guy as closely as possible. And while the girl was about to say something, the student managed to get ahead of her, saying that he was a student at Anna University. The young man said without any shame that he has a rich family. In addition, he considers himself more sympathetic than Jiang Chang. Our hero did everything possible so that the beauty no longer had to be with this gentleman, and therefore noted that they definitely could not compare in age, because the gentleman was most likely already 40 years old. Folding his arms across his chest, the young man noted that it turns out that Xiaomo is still very eloquent. And then he asked what the family of our hero does, if they can afford enough. But the student asked that he did not understand why his family should be discussed at such a meeting. And again, I decided to be sarcastic, saying that the man is such an adult, but he is still interested in other people's accounts because there are probably problems with his own. Jiang Chang remained silent, although it was obvious that he was offended by this treatment, especially since it was not deserved. Suddenly, the young man noticed that he knew for a fact that Miss Liu didn't have a suitor, meaning that she was free. Liu Feng carefully looked at this man. She was afraid because she didn't understand what he knew about her. But Xiaomo wasn't going to give up, so he asked how stupid Mr. Wang was, adding that the beauty had given the reason why the young man was here. Hugging his friend, our hero proudly declared that this is his woman. He fell in love with her at first sight. Therefore, sooner or later their parents will find out about this relationship, so it's better for a man to stop courting this beauty. Wang Ke was angry. He was talking about how a student didn't have the right to say anything like that, and he added that he will definitely deal with the young man. If not now, then a little later. The master turned away, not happy with what was happening. But Xiaomo was still in a good mood. Immediately, the young man nervously turned to Liu Feng and told her to forgive him because this man had made him lose his temper. Hence, he had involved the girl in this game. But she said modestly that she didn't mind. Given the whole situation, the beauty once again awkwardly talked about how she was very grateful to Xiaomo for all that he had done for her. They stood there until Mr. Wang left, after which Liu Feng once again thanked her friend for his help and suddenly offered our hero to become her young man for real. The guy did not like to refuse people. He understood that he did not want to justify himself and therefore asked his sister not to be stupid. And in the next minute, the student's phone rang. The teenager explained that it was the director of the TV station calling. Probably he had something important to say, and therefore, it was necessary to answer the call. As he left, Xiaomo mentioned that it was already time for him to go, but he would definitely contact his acquaintance later. Inwardly, the beauty thought that this young man was a coward, afraid that she would fall in love with him. And I asked myself, because it's true that she treats this person exclusively as a friend, because she can't like him. After a while, our hero was already in the TV station, wanting to find out what the manager wants. The man explained that he did not want to disturb the student, but there was one important matter, and therefore asked him to come urgently. Xiaomo, with his usual sincerity and simplicity, said that there was really no problem with this. He thought to himself that he was the one who should be thanking the headmaster for the life-saving call that had helped him escape. He would be in big trouble if Xiaoxi found out that he was playing the role of someone's boyfriend, and also that a girl was offering him a relationship. After a while, our hero, as well as the manager, went together to the office, where there were already some people. The director happily said that now everything is in place, and therefore, it's time to start. The annoyed student noticed that Xiaomo was late again, although, of course, Xiaomo considered himself special in this place. However, the young man smiled and said that probably everyone had forgotten that he was a freshman. There were so many lessons. It was quite difficult to allocate free time and come as quickly as they say. Several of the kids were looking at the young man carefully, as if he had said something unusual. Song Li-shin thought to himself that he had completely forgotten that this guy was only in his first year. Another person noted that the guy is so young, but despite this, he has achieved a lot, and therefore this can only be envied. The headmaster wasn't going to discuss the merits of everyone who came, so he started coughing to get attention. The man said that he had gathered everyone to tell them an important news. They invited 2 academicians so that they could prepare young people for an international tournament. Xiaomo immediately asked a counter question. It was about why such great people should be invited to participate in an entertainment show, because the program does not carry anything special. But the director explained that a couple of days ago they were contacted by several foreign participants. They offered to play along in the tournament. Song Li-shin said that these people weren't so confident last year. Why would they suddenly offer to give in to them if there was a catch? But the chief immediately noted that in fact they do not want to give in to anyone. On the contrary, these people demanded money and promised that they would concede their victory to the opposing side. Jumping up from his seat, one of the contestants shouted that he didn't understand what was wrong with these foreigners, since they were talking about such things. The director again said that they didn't know what those people were up to, so they refused their offer. But immediately after that, they launched an international company. They claim that they tried to bribe them to fake the results of the tournament, and of course, they allegedly refused to do so. Right now, foreigners are engaged in malicious speculation, spreading slander, accusing everyone of academic fraud. This is an emergency situation, and therefore many countries have turned against China. We can say that the nature of the tournament has changed. They must win. There is no question of losing. At that moment, a board appeared in front of Xiaomo, and a new task immediately appeared on it. It consisted in the fact that the young man must prove to the world that the power of science is pure, conspiracy and cheating are unacceptable, and the reward will be 1 attempt in an advanced game. At the same time, the director asked everyone to get acquainted with the same academicians from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. They will be responsible for preparing the contestants. Academician Zhao said that the guys are the pride of their country, quite possibly the greatest representatives of the human race. But even top-notch athletes can improve their performance with the help of professional coaches. This is a team competition, and the focus of abilities varies from competition to competition, so we must test the abilities of those gathered. He wants to know their memory, calculation, observation, experience, and intuition. After that, the academicians will determine the order in which everyone will perform. It will depend on the strength of each student. Song Li-shin carefully looked at our hero, thinking to himself that this young man is strong, but the young man still didn't believe that this guy could be stronger than him, thinking that he was just lucky last time. Getting up from his seat, the man said that the preparation will take a week, so the participants will have to work hard. They must do everything possible to bring victory to their country. After a while, the meeting ended, and therefore everyone gathered dispersed. But Song Li-shin was not himself. He knew that Xiaomo was a real genius, and therefore did not understand how to improve his knowledge in all areas. In turn, the young man did not understand what was happening to the student who was acting strangely. The guys, moving along the corridor, happily said that now it's time to go home. The director told Zhao that everyone was told that the training session would last for a week. Despite this, everyone scattered on the first day, although the academician noted that participants do not have to be here all the time. And then he said that he couldn't believe that they had an all-round genius in the team, which means that this time they will definitely win. The professor immediately said that Xiaomo got the highest score in the selection round. He has an exceptional memory. The guy proved the 5 most difficult hypotheses and has the best computational ability. His performance with the microscopic identification of water test can't be compared to anything else. They saw success with their own eyes, although it may sound strange, but everyone can be calm, because to see is to believe. The man was actually glad that they had such a unique student. A week later, our hero was at the train station telling Xiaoxi that he was ready to go. The girl asked the teenager to give everything to the fullest. The beauties warned that the most important thing is not to put pressure on yourself, and also not to demand too much. But the young man, as usual, confidently stated that Xiaoxi should not worry, because he will definitely cope and win. And as he left, he noted that the reason is that he is unique. He is the strongest genius.